On Father's Day, my son called to cancel our traditional dinner. His wife snatched the phone and coldly declared they were celebrating at her family's estate with just immediate family. I did not argue. I drove straight to my college roommate's oceanfront mansion. When I posted a single photo of our toast online, my phone exploded with 57 panicked messages. The man sitting across from me turned out to be the exact billionaire investor holding their entire financial survival in his hands. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe respect is earned and never bought. I am Earl, 69 years old, and a retired structural engineer. I spent my career designing foundations meant to withstand massive pressure. I never expected the greatest structural failure I would witness to be my own son's spine. I stood in my kitchen preparing my famous buttermilk pancakes. The cast iron griddle hummed with heat and the scent of melting butter filled the room. This was our rigid Father's Day tradition. For 30 years, no matter where DeAndre lived or what he was doing, he sat at this island counter to eat my pancakes. I had the blueberries washed and the maple syrup warmed to the exact right temperature. The digital clock on the microwave read 9 in the morning. He was supposed to arrive at 10. My phone rang on the countertop. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered, fully expecting him to say he was stuck in traffic. Instead, his voice sounded thin, hesitant, and incredibly tight. He told me he could not make it today. He mumbled a weak string of words about a sudden change in plans, about how busy his new tech startup had been, and how he desperately needed to manage his time better. I listened to the nervous cadence of his speech. A father knows the precise tone his son uses when he is hiding behind a lie. I asked him directly what was going on. I told him the griddle was hot and the coffee was brewing. I reminded him we had planned this specific morning for a month. DeAndre stammered. He could not form a coherent sentence to justify breaking a 3-decade bond. Before he could invent another pathetic excuse, the sound of the phone shuffling passed through the speaker. A different voice took over the line. Jessica snatched the phone from my son. Her voice was crisp, authoritative, and utterly devoid of warmth. She did not offer a basic greeting. She did not wish me a happy Father's Day. She immediately launched into a polished corporate directive. She informed me they were redirecting their afternoon. They were attending a fully catered event at her parents' country club estate in the Hamptons. I stood there holding the phone, looking at the 2 empty plates I had set on the counter. Jessica continued her monologue. She detailed the extravagance of the party, making sure I understood the immense scale of the event I was excluded from. She mentioned the private chef, the string quartet, and the networking opportunities DeAndre simply could not miss. I let her speak. I never interrupt people who are busy exposing their true character. I waited for her to finish her exhausting itinerary of privilege. When she paused for breath, I asked a simple question. I asked if I should pack the pancakes in a container and drive up to join them. I knew the answer, but I needed her to say it out loud. I needed her to verbalize the boundary she was drawing. Jessica let out a short, patronizing sigh. It was the kind of sigh a frustrated teacher gives a slow student. She coldly stated that would not be appropriate at all. She said her parents had curated a highly specific guest list for the afternoon. Then she delivered the final blow with absolute calculated precision. She explicitly said it was just immediate family this year. She told me I surely understood the need for an exclusive, tight-knit gathering. Just immediate family. The phrase hung in the air, heavy and toxic. She was a 32-year-old white woman dictating the parameters of my bloodline. She was erasing my position as a father to elevate her parents' social gathering. She was telling me I did not belong in the inner circle of my own son's life. I could hear DeAndre breathing in the background. He did not object. He did not defend me. He remained entirely silent while his wife redefined his family tree to exclude his black father. I did not raise my voice. I did not demand respect. Respect is something you command, not something you beg for. I told her I understood perfectly. I hung up the phone. I placed the device face down on the cold granite counter. I turned around and looked at Evelyn's brass urn resting on the living room mantel. The morning sun caught the polished metal. Evelyn had been gone for 5 years, but her sharp intuition remained a constant presence in this house. She warned me on her deathbed about this exact scenario. She held my hand, her breathing shallow, and told me DeAndre's desperation to fit into Jessica's wealthy world would eventually erase him. Evelyn saw the cracks in his pride long before I did. She recognized that Jessica did not view our family as equals. Jessica viewed us as a diverse charity project she had successfully managed. Evelyn told me to hold my ground when the day came. That day had officially arrived. I looked back at the kitchen counter. The pancake batter bubbled in the glass bowl. The blueberries sat fresh in their ceramic colander. I picked up the heavy glass bowl and walked to the sink. I threw the entire batch of buttermilk batter down the drain. I turned on the garbage disposal and let it grind away the morning's preparations. I washed the bowl, dried it, and put it back in the cabinet. I took off my apron and folded it over the back of a chair. I walked to the hallway closet and grabbed my light linen jacket. I picked up my car keys from the hook by the door. I was not going to sit in an empty house wallowing in rejection. I was a retired engineer who had built bridges that withstood massive hurricanes. I would not let a spoiled daughter-in-law crack my foundation. I walked out to the garage and got into my car. I backed out of the driveway and merged onto the highway, pointing the vehicle east toward the coast. My phone vibrated violently against the leather of the passenger seat. I glanced over at the screen. A text message from Stanley illuminated the display. It read, "Gate code is 4821. The scotch is already poured. I am Edgar, 69 years old, and a retired structural engineer who spent a lifetime building foundations meant to withstand massive pressure. I never expected the greatest structural failure I would witness to be my own son's spine. On Father's Day, my son called to cancel our traditional dinner. His wife snatched the phone and coldly declared they were celebrating at her family's estate with just immediate family. I did not argue. I drove straight to my college roommate's oceanfront mansion. When I posted a single photo of our toast online, my phone exploded with 57 panicked messages. The man sitting beside me turned out to be the exact billionaire investor holding their entire financial survival in his hands. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe respect is earned and never bought. I stood in my kitchen preparing my famous buttermilk pancakes. The cast iron griddle hummed with heat, and the scent of melting butter filled the room. This was our rigid Father's Day tradition. For 30 years, no matter where Cameron lived or what he was doing, he sat at this island counter to eat my pancakes. I had the blueberries washed and the maple syrup warmed to the exact right temperature. I bought the highest quality ingredients. The kitchen was perfectly clean, the morning sunlight catching the edge of the steel appliances. I had even polished his favorite ceramic mug. The digital clock on the microwave read 9 in the morning. He was supposed to arrive at 10. My phone rang on the countertop. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered, fully expecting him to say he was stuck in traffic. Instead, his voice sounded thin, hesitant, and incredibly tight. He told me he could not make it today. He mumbled a weak string of words about a sudden change in plans, about how busy his new technology startup had been, and how he desperately needed to manage his time better. I listened to the nervous cadence of his speech. A father knows the precise tone his son uses when he is hiding behind a lie. I asked him directly what was going on. I told him the griddle was hot and the coffee was brewing. I reminded him we had planned this specific morning for an entire month. Cameron stammered. He could not form a coherent sentence to justify breaking a 3-decade bond. Before he could invent another pathetic excuse, the sound of the phone shuffling passed through the speaker. A different voice took over the line. Haley snatched the phone from my son. Her voice was crisp, authoritative, and utterly devoid of warmth. She spoke with the practiced rhythm of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. She did not offer a basic greeting. She did not wish me a happy Father's Day. She immediately launched into a polished corporate directive. She informed me they were redirecting their afternoon. They were attending a fully catered event at her parents' country club estate in the Hamptons. I stood there holding the phone, looking at the 2 empty plates I had set on the counter. Haley continued her monologue. She detailed the extravagance of the party, making sure I understood the immense scale of the event I was excluded from. She mentioned the private chef, the string quartet, and the networking opportunities Cameron simply could not miss. I let her speak. I never interrupt people who are busy exposing their true character. I waited for her to finish her exhausting itinerary of privilege. When she paused for breath, I asked a simple question. I asked if I should pack the pancakes in a container and drive up to join them. I knew the answer, but I needed her to say it out loud. I needed her to verbalize the strict boundary she was drawing. Haley let out a short, patronizing sigh. It was the kind of sigh a frustrated teacher gives a slow student. She coldly stated that would not be appropriate at all. She said her parents had curated a highly specific guest list for the afternoon. Then she delivered the final blow with absolute calculated precision. She explicitly said it was just immediate family this year. She told me I surely understood the need for an exclusive, tight-knit gathering. Just immediate family. The phrase hung in the air heavy and toxic. She was a 32-year-old white woman dictating the parameters of my bloodline. She was erasing my position as a father to elevate her parents' social gathering. She was telling me I did not belong in the inner circle of my own son's life. I could hear Cameron breathing in the background. He did not object. He did not defend me. He remained entirely silent while his wife redefined his family tree to exclude his black father. Her words were sharp and deliberate, designed to cut through any argument I might attempt to make. I did not raise my voice. I did not demand respect. Respect is something you command, not something you beg for. I told her I understood perfectly. I hung up the phone. I placed the device face down on the cold granite counter. I turned around and looked at Sylvia's brass urn resting on the living room mantel. The morning sun caught the polished metal. Sylvia had been gone for 5 years, but her sharp intuition remained a constant presence in this house. She had warned me that true character is revealed when people believe they hold all the power. She warned me on her deathbed about this exact scenario. She held my hand, her breathing shallow, and told me Cameron's desperation to fit into Haley's wealthy world would eventually erase him. Sylvia saw the cracks in his pride long before I did. She recognized that Haley did not view our family as equals. Haley viewed us as a diverse charity project she had successfully managed. Sylvia told me to hold my ground when the day came. That day had officially arrived. I looked back at the kitchen counter. The pancake batter bubbled in the glass bowl. The blueberries sat fresh in their colander. I picked up the heavy glass bowl and walked to the sink. I watched the thick batter disappear down the drain, taking 30 years of unbroken tradition with it. I turned on the garbage disposal and let it grind away the morning's preparations. I washed the bowl, dried it, and put it back in the cabinet. I took off my apron and folded it over the back of a chair. I walked to the hallway closet and grabbed my light linen jacket. I picked up my car keys from the hook by the door. I was not going to sit in an empty house wallowing in rejection. I was a retired engineer who had built bridges that withstood massive hurricanes. I would not let a spoiled daughter-in-law crack my foundation. I walked out to the garage and got into my car. I backed out of the driveway and merged onto the highway, pointing the vehicle east toward the coast. My phone vibrated violently against the leather of the passenger seat. I glanced over at the screen. A text message from Simon illuminated the display. It read that the gate code was 4821 and the scotch was already poured. The vibration against the mahogany table feels like a localized seismic event. I sit completely still and watch the notifications pile up on the glass screen. DeAndre's name flashes repeatedly in rapid succession. Then Jessica's number appears. She has not texted me directly in over 8 months. Now she is flooding my inbox with an urgency that borders on hysteria. I pick up the device. The metal casing is actually warm from the rapid influx of data transmitting through the cellular network. I swipe down to read the notifications. The text messages read like a masterclass in frantic backpedaling. Dad, we are so deeply sorry for the miscommunication this morning. DeAndre completely misunderstood my party plans. We would absolutely love for you to join us right now. Please bring your wonderful friend along. We have plenty of room. The sheer audacity of her sudden pivot is breathtaking. Just hours ago, I was an unwanted relic explicitly excluded from their elite circle. Now I am suddenly the VIP guest of honor. I scroll through the endless wall of text. The desperation bleeds through the glowing pixels. She uses phrases like family unity and cherished moments. I watch the screen illuminate repeatedly, each flash a testament to their unraveling composure. A structural engineer learns early on that pressure reveals the weakest points in any material. Right now, DeAndre and Jessica are proving to be exceptionally fragile. They built a bridge of lies to isolate themselves, and now that bridge is collapsing under the sudden weight of reality. I let the phone vibrate continuously in my palm. I do not type a single letter in response. I simply observe their digital meltdown. The notifications shift from polite invitations to frantic pleas. Dad, please pick up. We have a seat saved for you right at the head of the table. Please call us back. The shift from blatant exclusion to absolute desperation happens in less than 10 minutes. I slide the phone across the table towards Stanley. He adjusts his reading glasses and reviews the glowing screen. A deep, resonant chuckle escapes his chest. He leans back in his patio chair, looking out at the crashing waves of the Atlantic. He tells me this panic makes perfect mathematical sense. He explains that Jessica's father has been calling his private office line nonstop since Thursday morning. Her family is begging for a lifeline to save their sinking logistics company. DeAndre's signature is heavily tied to those failing loan applications. They need Stanley's $2 million cash injection to avoid total bankruptcy. Seeing the exact man holding their financial execution cord sitting comfortably next to the father they just discarded sent them into a blind panic. They realize they just insulted the one man who has a direct personal line to their salvation. The irony is as rich as the aged scotch in my glass. I take my phone back from Stanley. The screen lights up with another incoming call from Jessica. I slide my thumb across the power button and press down firmly. The screen goes entirely black. The relentless buzzing finally stops. The silence that follows is exquisite. We leave the terrace and move into Stanley's grand dining room. His private chef serves us dry-aged ribeye steaks with roasted asparagus and garlic potatoes. We eat like kings. We talk about the architecture of suspension bridges, the structural integrity of steel beams, and reminisce about our early days surviving the brutal academic rigor at Howard University. We completely ignore the digital firestorm I left trapped inside my powered-down device. Stanley pours me a fresh glass of water as the chef clears our empty plates. We move to his expansive living room surrounded by modern art and floor-to-ceiling windows. We do not turn the television on. We do not seek external entertainment. We just sit in the quiet luxury of success earned through decades of uncompromising discipline. I think about my son sitting at a country club refreshing his phone, sweating through his tailored suit while his wealthy in-laws demand answers he cannot provide. I gave them exactly what they asked for this morning. I gave them space. I removed myself from their immediate family. The fact that my absence is now causing them immense financial distress is a problem they created entirely on their own. I savor every moment of the evening. I feel absolutely no guilt. A man cannot feel guilty for removing himself from a table where no seat was offered. I spend the next 4 hours enjoying the company of a true brother, letting my son and his wife drown in the agonizing silence of my unresponsiveness. It is past 11 at night when I finally say my goodbyes to Stanley. The coastal air is cool and heavy with salt. I get back into my sedan and merge onto the dark highway. The drive back to my neighborhood takes 45 minutes. The roads are entirely empty, allowing my mind to process the events of the day in perfect peace. I think about Evelyn again. She always said silence is the loudest answer you can give a bully. I gave them 4 hours of absolute unbroken silence, forcing them to sit with the consequences of their own arrogance. I turn into my subdivision. The streetlights are dim, casting long, familiar shadows across the manicured lawns. My street is usually perfectly quiet by this hour. I approach my property line expecting to see my empty driveway and the dark silhouette of my house. Instead, a massive white luxury SUV sits parked aggressively across the curb. The vehicle's front tires are crushing my front lawn, digging deep grooves into the grass I meticulously maintain every weekend. I pull my car into the driveway and put it in park. My headlights sweep across the front porch, cutting through the darkness. 2 figures are huddled together on my concrete steps. DeAndre and Jessica are sitting in the freezing night air. They are still wearing their expensive country club attire. Jessica has a designer coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders, shivering visibly against the dropping temperature. DeAndre stands up immediately as my headlights hit him. He squints against the blinding glare, raising a hand to shield his eyes. I tap my fingers against the steering wheel. I calculate the structural damage to my lawn. They have driven a heavy luxury vehicle over soft soil, demonstrating the same lack of respect for my physical property as they did for my emotional presence. They have been sitting out here for hours waiting for a man they deemed unworthy of their catered food. The temperature has dropped significantly, a harsh reminder that the world does not cater to their comfort. I watch Jessica rub her arms rapidly, her teeth likely chattering. DeAndre looks pale in the stark illumination of my headlights. I do not feel pity. Pity is a luxury reserved for those who fall by accident, not for those who jump off cliffs of their own arrogance. I turn off the engine. I do not rush to open my door. I sit in the driver's seat and look at the 2 people who explicitly uninvited me from their lives 12 hours ago. Now they are trespassing on my property, waiting in the dark to ambush me. I grab my keys, brace myself for the inevitable excuses, and step out of the car into the cold night. I close the car door with a heavy thud. The sound echoes down the silent street. DeAndre and Jessica practically sprint toward me across the paved walkway. Jessica is holding a sleek, dark bottle of wine with a gold foil wrapper. She attempts to initiate a warm embrace, thrusting her arms forward with a wide, artificial smile. I step firmly to the left. Her arms wrap around empty air. She catches her balance awkwardly, her heels clicking against the concrete. DeAndre clears his throat and refuses to make direct eye contact. He stares at the hood of my car instead. Jessica quickly recovers her composure and thrusts the bottle of wine toward my chest. She announces it is a rare vintage from her father's private cellar brought specifically to celebrate Father's Day with me. I look at the bottle and then at her face. Her makeup is flawless, but the panic in her eyes is completely transparent. She launches into a rapid, highly rehearsed explanation. She claims the morning phone call was a catastrophic misunderstanding. She says the cell service was terrible and cut off the second half of her sentence. She insists she was actually trying to tell me that the immediate family was gathering first for photos before the main event, and she had every intention of sending a driver to bring me to the estate. It is a spectacular fabrication. A structural engineer knows that adding decorative trim to a collapsing wall does not stop the building from falling. She speaks faster and faster, trying to bury her previous insults under an avalanche of flattery. She mentions how much they missed my presence, and how the entire afternoon felt incomplete without me. DeAndre finally speaks up, his voice cracking slightly in the cold air. He tells me they have been waiting for 4 hours just to make things right. He says family is the most important thing in the world to them. I do not accept the bottle of wine. I let her stand there holding it in the freezing wind. I walk past them and approach my front door. I slide my key into the brass lock. The deadbolt clicks open with a sharp mechanical snap. I push the heavy oak door inward, letting the warmth of my hallway spill out onto the porch. DeAndre immediately steps forward, expecting to follow me inside. I turn around and stand squarely in the center of the doorframe. My shoulders block the entrance entirely. I look down at my son. I tell him the house is closed for the evening. Jessica lets out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. She steps up beside DeAndre and attempts to hand me the wine again. She suggests we go inside, open the bottle, and call my good friend Stanley to invite him over for a late-night toast. There it is. The core objective is finally laid bare. They do not care about Father's Day. They do not care about my feelings. They only care about securing a direct line of communication to the billionaire holding their financial execution cord. I look Jessica directly in the eyes. I tell her I do not drink wine with strangers. Her fake smile falters. I remind her of the exact words she used 12 hours ago. I tell her my home is currently reserved for immediate family only, and based on her own strict definitions, they no longer qualify for entry. DeAndre's face flushes with sudden anger. He demands I stop acting like a stubborn old man. He tells me his business is facing a critical juncture, and Stanley's investment firm is the only entity capable of saving it. He begs me to make one simple phone call to guarantee the bailout. He claims I owe him this favor as his father. I maintain absolute stillness. I inform him I am merely respecting the boundaries his wife established. I will not facilitate a meeting. I will not make a phone call. I will not leverage my lifelong brotherhood with Stanley to subsidize their toxic lifestyle. I tell DeAndre he must solve his own financial crisis without using my name as a bargaining chip. Jessica drops the polite facade instantly. The diplomatic mask shatters, revealing the vicious entitlement lurking underneath. Her face twists into a snarl. She tightens her grip on the wine bottle, her knuckles turning white. She screams that my arrogance is exactly why my family avoids me. She raises her voice, letting her words bounce off the neighboring houses. She declares that my refusal to adapt to their high-class society is a pathetic display of jealousy. She steps closer, her breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. She weaponizes my late wife against me. Jessica spits out that my relentless stubbornness is the exact reason Evelyn died miserable in this cheap, outdated neighborhood instead of a luxury care facility. She claims Evelyn spent her final days suffocating in mediocrity because I was too proud to accept financial help from my betters. The sheer cruelty of her statement hangs in the cold air. Evelyn loved this house. We built our lives between these walls. We laughed in the kitchen and danced in the living room. Evelyn died peacefully, holding my hand, completely surrounded by the love we cultivated for 4 decades. Jessica's attempt to rewrite my sacred history with my wife is the ultimate violation. DeAndre finally flinches. He reaches out to grab Jessica's arm, muttering that she has gone too far. I do not shout. I do not curse. I look at my son, observing the pathetic shell of a man he has chosen to become. I tell DeAndre he has chosen his master perfectly. I step backward into my hallway. I grab the edge of the heavy oak door and slam it shut with tremendous force. The impact shakes the doorframe and echoes through the silent house. I turn the deadbolt, locking them out in the cold. I stand in the quiet warmth of my foyer, listening to the muffled sounds of Jessica screaming at DeAndre on my front lawn. I take off my linen jacket and hang it in the closet. I walk toward the living room to turn on the lamps. As I step past the entryway console, my foot brushes against something thick and heavy. I look down at the hardwood floor. A crumpled manila envelope lies near the baseboard. It must have fallen from DeAndre's oversized coat pocket while he was frantically pacing on my porch earlier. I bend down and pick it up. The envelope is unsealed, bulging with folded documents. I can see the official red ink of a bank stamp peeking through the top flap. I pull the thick stack of papers from the unsealed manila envelope. The heavy parchment feels wrong in my hands. The official red ink of a bank stamp bleeds through the top sheet. It is from a major commercial lending institution. I walk into the living room and turn on the reading lamp beside my leather armchair. I lay the documents flat on the coffee table, arranging them with the same meticulous precision I used to lay out architectural blueprints. The stark, bold letters at the top of the first page form a sequence of words that temporarily stops the air in my lungs. Notice of intent to foreclose. I trace my index finger over the black ink, feeling the indentations of the laser printer on the paper. Directly below the catastrophic heading, my own home address is listed. The property coordinates are typed out with absolute legal clarity. This is my house. This is the exact piece of land where Evelyn and I built our lives. I stare at the address, reading the familiar street name and zip code over and over again. An engineer understands that a catastrophic failure rarely happens overnight. It begins with microfractures in visible stress points, accumulating pressure until the entire system gives way. I am looking at the epicenter of a massive structural collapse. I do not panic. Panic is a useless emotion that clouds judgment and delays necessary action. I approach the document like an active crime scene. I read the secondary lines. The bank is demanding immediate action regarding delinquent payments. The account number listed does not belong to me. The routing information is completely foreign. Yet the property attached as collateral is the very floor I am standing on. I pick up the second page. The legal jargon is dense, designed to intimidate and confuse the average reader. I am not the average reader. I spent 30 years navigating Byzantine zoning laws and municipal building codes. I isolate the core variables. Someone has pledged my home as collateral to a commercial lending firm. The warning states that the bank intends to seize the property within 60 days due to 90 consecutive days of non-payment. I flip to the third page, seeking the origin point of this disaster. The paper rustles loudly in the silent house. The reality of the situation settles into my bones. Someone has orchestrated a deliberate, calculated attack on my sanctuary. I adjust my reading glasses. I need to see the numbers. I need to understand the scale of the theft. The third page contains the financial breakdown of the loan agreement. My eyes lock onto the principal amount, $500,000. A $500,000 equity line of credit was extracted against the value of my property exactly 3 months ago. The math is not just incorrect, it is entirely impossible. I walk over to the heavy iron safe tucked inside my home office. I input the combination, turn the heavy dial, and pull out a thick blue folder. Inside is the original deed to this house. 15 years ago, Evelyn and I walked into our local bank branch and handed the teller a final cashier's check. We had sacrificed vacations, new cars, and luxury dinners to accelerate our mortgage payments. We wanted to own our foundation outright. Evelyn insisted that our home needed to be a fortress immune to the unpredictable whims of landlords and volatile markets. I hold the original deed in my left hand and the foreclosure notice in my right. A fully paid-off property cannot simply generate a $500,000 equity loan without the direct in-person authorization of the sole title holder. I return to the living room and sit back down in my armchair. I study the disbursement dates. 3 months ago aligns perfectly with the time frame when DeAndre's tech logistics startup began hemorrhaging capital. It aligns perfectly with the sudden shift in Jessica's lifestyle, the new leased vehicles, and the sudden influx of catered parties. They did not just borrow money, they cannibalized the literal roof over my head. I look at the borrower signatures on the 4th page of the copied loan agreement. There at the bottom of the page is my name. It is written in blue ink. The spelling is correct. The general curvature of the letters mimics my own handwriting. but an engineer's eye is trained to detect microscopic inconsistencies. I scrutinize the signature. It lacks the heavy, deliberate pressure I apply to the paper. The loops on the capital letters are too fast, too fluid. It is a practiced forgery. Someone sat down, studied my signature, and replicated it well enough to fool a low-level loan officer. But they did not act alone. A transaction of this magnitude requires authentication. It requires a licensed state official to verify the identity of the signatory. I turn to the final page of the document, hunting for the enabler of this massive fraud. The final page of the commercial loan agreement features the standard legal boilerplate required for property equity transfers. At the very bottom, next to my forged signature, sits a raised circular indentation over a black ink stamp. I hold the paper directly under the warm glow of the reading lamp to enhance the contrast. It is an official state notary seal. The stamp confirms that on the 14th of March, I supposedly presented myself in person, provided a government-issued identification, and willingly signed away $500,000 of equity. I read the name printed inside the border of the notary stamp. Melissa Sterling. The breath leaves my chest in a sharp, sudden exhale. Melissa is Jessica's older sister. She works as a corporate real estate broker in the city. The connection locks into place with the terrifying precision of a steel vault door closing. This was not a desperate, spur-of-the-moment mistake committed by a panicked son. This was a highly coordinated, multi-party conspiracy executed by Jessica's entire family. DeAndre provided them with access to my personal information. Jessica likely supplied them with a sample of my signature from a birthday card or an old college tuition check I wrote a decade ago. Melissa utilized her state-appointed power to legally authenticate a ghost. They sat in a room, copied my name, stamped the paper, and legally stole my fortress. They drained the equity I built with my dead wife to subsidize their illusion of wealth. Jessica's vicious tirade on my front porch plays back in my mind. She had screamed that Evelyn died miserable in this cheap neighborhood. She had screamed out of pure projection and guilt, knowing full well that she had already stolen the very value of the neighborhood she was insulting. They uninvited me from Father's Day because looking me in the eye would require them to face the man they had secretly robbed. Their sudden panic tonight was not about family unity. It was about damage control. They needed Stanley's bailout money to replace the stolen equity before the commercial bank foreclosed on my house and triggered a federal investigation. The scale of their betrayal transcends mere disrespect. It is a felony. I fold the papers and slide them back into the manila envelope. I check the grandfather clock standing in the corner of the hallway. The brass pendulum swings back and forth. The hands point to exactly 2 o'clock in the morning. I pull my mobile phone from my pocket. I bypass the missed calls from my son. I open my contacts and dial the direct cellular number for my attorney, Mr. Hayes. I hold the phone to my ear, listening to the dial tone ring through the silent house. He answers on the first ring. Monday morning arrives with a heavy, overcast sky that matches the cold weight in my chest. I stand on the concrete steps of the downtown commercial bank branch exactly at 8:55. Mr. Hayes arrives 2 minutes later. He is a man who speaks softly but carries an arsenal of legal devastation in his leather briefcase. We do not exchange pleasantries. We spent Sunday building an airtight timeline of the fraud. When the heavy glass doors unlock at exactly 9 o'clock, we do not stop at the teller line. We do not speak to the front desk receptionist. We bypass the waiting area entirely and walk directly down the carpeted hallway toward the branch manager's office. The heavy oak door is halfway open. I push it the rest of the way. The branch manager is a man in his late 40s wearing a tailored suit that screams middle management arrogance. He looks up from his computer monitor, his face instantly contorting into a mask of corporate indignation. He opens his mouth to demand we leave his private workspace. I do not give him the opportunity to form a single syllable. I step forward and throw the crumpled foreclosure notice directly onto his polished mahogany desk. The thick stack of papers lands with a sharp, heavy thud that echoes off the glass walls of his office. I place both of my hands flat on the edge of his desk and lean forward, invading his personal space. I tell him my name. I tell him he has authorized a $500,000 equity extraction against a property that has been completely paid off for 15 years. The manager glances down at the red ink stamped across the top page of the document. The indignation drops from his face, instantly replaced by a sudden creeping panic. He recognizes the internal code on the foreclosure notice. He reaches for his mouse, his fingers trembling slightly, and begins typing rapidly on his keyboard. Mr. Hayes steps up beside me, placing his briefcase on the leather guest chair. He informs the manager that this is not a customer service dispute. He states that this bank has facilitated massive real estate fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse. He gives the manager exactly 30 seconds to access the digital loan file before we march directly to the federal prosecutor's office. The branch manager swallows hard, the clicking of his mouse echoing in the tense silence of the room. He pulls up the digital file on his screen. I demand to see the time-stamped security footage from the exact day and hour this fraudulent loan was authorized. The manager hesitates, his corporate training kicking in to protect the institution. He stammers about privacy protocols, internal bank policies, and the strict need for a formal subpoena to release video surveillance. He attempts to placate us, suggesting we open an internal fraud investigation that could take up to 90 days to process. He is trying to protect his job. I look at Mr. Hayes. My attorney does not raise his voice. He leans over the mahogany desk and delivers a masterclass in legal intimidation. He names the exact federal statutes the bank has violated. He outlines the chain of custody regarding the fraudulent notary stamp belonging to Melissa Sterling. He tells the manager that Melissa is the sister-in-law of the man who received the funds, a fact the bank failed to verify during their grossly negligent underwriting process. Mr. Hayes promises to file a massive federal lawsuit naming the bank, the underwriter, and this specific branch manager as co-conspirators in a $500,000 wire fraud operation. He promises to freeze the branch's daily operations by lunch and have federal agents confiscating their servers by dinner. The manager's face drains of all color. The threat of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit and personal criminal liability completely shatters his corporate loyalty. He realizes he is standing on the tracks of a speeding freight train. He stops arguing. He types a new command into his system, his hands shaking so violently he miskeys his password twice. He finally accesses the branch security archive. He inputs the exact date and time listed on the fraudulent loan application. He finds the specifics camera feed pointing directly at the loan officer's desk. He lets out a shaky breath, his eyes darting between my stoic face and Mr. Hayes's unyielding glare. He physically rotates his large computer monitor around so it directly faces Mr. Hayes and me. The high-definition surveillance video begins to play. I stare at the glowing screen, bracing myself to witness the absolute destruction of my family line in pristine digital clarity. The surveillance footage lacks audio, but the visual evidence is deafening. The camera angle looks down over the loan officer's desk. Two figures sit in the leather client chairs, DeAndre and Jessica. They are dressed impeccably, exuding an air of established wealth that is entirely financed by lies. I watch my son lean forward and engage the loan officer in animated conversation. He smiles, gesturing with his hands, projecting total confidence. He is selling a fiction. Jessica sits beside him, holding a thick folder of documents. She looks calm, composed, and utterly devoid of moral hesitation. The loan officer slides a digital tablet across the desk. DeAndre takes the electronic stylus. He does not hesitate. He signs the screen. The branch manager clicks a button to overlay the digital signature captured by the tablet onto the video feed. I look at the stylized loops and sharp angles of the electronic ink. I recognize the signature pattern immediately. It is my signature, but it is not current. It is a highly specific replication of the way I signed my name 10 years ago. I spent 30 years engineering defense protocols, but my greatest vulnerability was sitting at my own kitchen table. During DeAndre's 4 years at university, I refused to let him take out student loans. I worked brutal overtime hours drafting structural blueprints until my eyes burned just to write those massive tuition checks every semester. I signed those checks with a distinct, hurried flourish, rushing to get to my next shift. DeAndre had studied the signature on those old checks. He weaponized my sacrifice against me. He used the exact handwriting that paid for his education to steal the foundation of my retirement. I feel a cold, absolute detachment wash over me. The final threads of paternal obligation snap and disintegrate into nothing. I turn my attention back to the terrified branch manager. I order him to instantly freeze the remaining balance of the dispersed loan funds. The manager scrambles to his keyboard, typing the override codes to lock the commercial accounts connected to DeAndre and Jessica. He confirms the funds are officially frozen. Mr. Hayes secures a hard copy of the video file. We turn around and walk out of the bank, stepping back into the harsh morning light. As my shoes hit the concrete pavement, my phone vibrates aggressively in my pocket. I pull it out. DeAndre is calling. I answer the phone. He is screaming frantically, his voice cracking with sheer panic, demanding to know why every single one of his company credit cards just declined. The heavy oak door of my house shudders violently before the deadbolt shears completely through the wooden door jamb. Metal screws strip from the strike plate. Wood splinters scatter across the entryway rug, a visceral display of forced entry. Cameron steps through the ruined doorway, breathing heavily. His designer suit jacket is wrinkled and his silk tie is pulled loose. He does not apologize for destroying the physical barrier of my home. He immediately demands to know what I did to his commercial accounts. He screams that his company cards are declining across the city and his vendors are threatening to halt all logistics operations. I remain seated in my leather armchair. I look at the splintered wood on the floor and then up at my son. I tell him I simply stopped a hemorrhage. I inform him I saw the loan documents, the forged signature, and Melissa Sterling's fraudulent notary stamp. The absolute certainty in my voice momentarily halts his rampage. He paces across the living room rug, running his hands over his face. He does not deny the theft. He attempts to reframe a federal felony as a standard business maneuver. He admits to taking out the $500,000 equity loan against my property. He aggressively justifies the action, claiming it was merely a temporary liquidity bridge to save Haley's parents' logistics company. He insists the money was going to be replaced the exact moment Simon approved their $2 million bailout. He speaks with the frantic delusion of a cornered gambler treating my stolen foundation as nothing more than chips pushed onto a roulette table. He expects me to accept this criminal violation as a simple misunderstanding between family members. He throws his hands in the air, asking how I could be so selfish as to freeze the funds when they were weeks away from closing the deal. He completely bypasses the reality that he forged his own father's name. The adrenaline begins to wear off, leaving Cameron grasping for a new strategy. He shifts his posture, dropping the aggressive business persona and adopting the role of a desperate victim. He looks at me with wide, frantic eyes and claims he committed mortgage fraud to save his marriage. He says Haley was preparing to leave him because her family business was failing and he lacked the personal capital to rescue them. He paces near the mantel, intentionally standing beneath Sylvia's urn, attempting to leverage his dead mother's memory. He tells me Sylvia would have wanted him to succeed at any cost. She would never have let his marriage collapse over money. I slide my right hand deep into the pocket of my trousers. My fingers find the smooth glass screen of my mobile phone. I press the tactile side button twice, initiating the hidden voice recording application I configured during my career in corporate engineering. I do not pull the device out. I let it capture every single syllable of his confession from the darkness of my pocket. Cameron's voice rises in pitch, fueled by a deep, rotting resentment. He points a shaking finger at me. He declares that I owe him the equity in this house. He claims my insistence on living a modest, disciplined life directly deprived him of the elite social standing he rightfully deserved. He spits out the word modest as if it were a terminal disease. He says he grew up watching his peers drive luxury cars and take international vacations while I forced him to work manual labor summer jobs to understand the value of a dollar. He resents every sacrifice I made to keep him out of debt. He tells me Haley grew up with absolute financial security and he was actively drowning trying to maintain the illusion that he belonged in her world. He justifies stealing my home because I never handed him a pre-built empire. He says the $500,000 was simply back pay for the luxury lifestyle I selfishly withheld from him during his childhood. I listen to the breathtaking entitlement spilling from my own flesh and blood. I do not raise my voice. I do not defend the decades I spent working overtime to secure his future. I sit in complete silence, allowing his toxic monologue to permanently document his guilt. He mistakes my silence for submission. He truly believes his emotional manipulation is effectively paralyzing me. When his tirade finally exhausts its momentum, the room falls dead quiet. I lean forward in my leather chair, resting my forearms on my knees. I speak with cold, mechanical precision. I outline my non-negotiable terms. I demand he repay the stolen $500,000 in full within 48 hours. I demand he formally surrender any remaining fractional claim to this property deed back to me. If he fails to meet these exact conditions, I will hand the bank security footage, the transaction logs, and the forged notary documents directly to the district attorney. Cameron stops pacing. A cold, arrogant sneer contorts his face. He looks down at me, entirely convinced of his own invincibility. He crosses his arms over his chest, his posture radiating a dangerous superiority. He tells me I have no actual power in this situation. He threatens to completely destroy my credibility before I can ever reach a courtroom. He explains that Haley's parents retain a massive team of high-priced corporate litigators who specialize in aggressive character assassination. If I attempt to file charges, those lawyers will instantly file an emergency medical injunction to have me declared legally incompetent. He threatens to construct a narrative claiming I am suffering from severe advanced dementia. He says they will use my recent isolation, my sudden withdrawal from family events, and my decision to freeze the bank accounts as undeniable proof of my mental decline. He promises to have me locked inside a state-run medical facility while he assumes total legal conservatorship over my remaining assets. He delivers this horrific threat with a casual, terrifying ease, demonstrating that he has already thought this through. He turns his back on me, adjusting his suit jacket to smooth out the wrinkles. He steps back over the splintered wood of the ruined doorway. He tells me to unlock the commercial accounts by noon tomorrow, or he will initiate the medical conservatorship. Cameron walks down the driveway and gets into his car, entirely confident he has won the war. He drives away, leaving me alone in the damaged house. I remove my phone from my pocket. I press the red square on the screen to stop the recording. I do not call the police. I open my secure messaging application. I attach the pristine, high-definition audio file containing his complete confession and his threat to institutionalize me. I press send. The file instantly transmits directly to Simon's encrypted corporate server. I step off the private elevator and into the sprawling penthouse suite of Simon's corporate headquarters. The floor-to-ceiling glass walls offer an unobstructed, commanding view of the city skyline. It is a high-altitude fortress built on venture capital and ruthless financial engineering, miles above the grounded reality of my modest neighborhood. Simon sits behind a massive desk carved from a single slab of reclaimed walnut. He does not greet me with standard pleasantries. He taps a key on his sleek silver laptop. The high-definition audio of Cameron's midnight confession instantly fills the expansive office. The recording captures every toxic syllable, every entitled demand, and the chilling, calculated threat to have me legally institutionalized. The sound of my own son plotting to lock me inside a psychiatric facility echoes off the cold glass. Simon listens with his hands steepled beneath his chin. His expression remains entirely unreadable until the recording ends with the heavy, violent thud of my front door closing. Simon turns his leather chair toward the window. He tells me he ran a comprehensive background check on Haley's parents' company the exact moment I sent the file early this morning. He outlines the brutal predatory reality of their logistics firm. They do not build anything of value. They operate as corporate parasites. They identify struggling technology startups, offer them heavily leveraged supply chain contracts, and intentionally choke the distribution lines. When the startups inevitably fail to meet the impossible revenue targets stipulated in the fine print, Haley's parents execute aggressive penalty clauses to seize the underlying intellectual property for pennies on the dollar. They drain the desperate founders, force the companies into bankruptcy, and absorb the clean assets. Simon turns back to face me. He taps a thick red dossier resting on his desk. He informs me that Cameron's startup is their latest target. Haley's parents are not trying to save their own failing business. They are actively orchestrating the collapse of Cameron's company so they can legally cannibalize his proprietary software. Cameron is completely blind to the trap. He forged my signature and stole my home's equity to feed the exact predators who are currently swallowing him whole. I process the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. My son compromised my financial security and threatened my freedom to appease people who are actively plotting his total ruin. I look at Simon. The anger hardening inside my chest solidifies into cold, structural resolve. I ask him how we tear down their framework. Simon smiles. It is a sharp, dangerous smile that instantly transports me back 40 years. During our time at Howard University, Simon and I spent countless nights in our cramped dormitory playing grueling matches of chess. I was a methodical engineer who focused on building impenetrable defenses and reinforcing my positions. Simon was a venture capitalist in training who specialized in aggressive, calculated destruction. He reminds me of the most important lesson he taught me over that battered wooden board. You never attack the king directly when he is fully fortified. A direct assault only triggers a defensive wall. Instead, you systematically dismantle the board. You isolate the king by removing every single piece that provides him with cover. Simon applies the strategy to the current crisis. Haley's parents derive their power from the illusion of absolute control and untouchable wealth. Cameron derives his false confidence from the arrogant belief that he can manipulate both sides of the equation without consequence. We must strip away those illusions simultaneously. An engineer knows that the most spectacular building collapses occur when you remove the load-bearing pillars from the inside out. Simon proposes we force them all into the same room under the guise of an official bailout negotiation. He will personally invite Haley's parents to host a formal investment dinner at their own Hamptons estate. He will dangle the $2 million cash injection directly in front of their faces. We will allow them to set the stage, polish their silver, and prepare their rehearsed lies. We will let them assemble the entire board, and then we will flip the table. Simon opens his encrypted email client. He pulls up the chain of frantic, desperate messages Cameron has been sending his private office since yesterday morning. The emails are pathetic. They are filled with wildly exaggerated revenue projections and beg for an immediate meeting to finalize the capital injection. Simon begins to type his response. He does not use polite corporate jargon. He writes with absolute, uncompromising authority. He formally agrees to attend the dinner at the Hamptons estate this coming Friday evening. He confirms he will bring the necessary legal documents to initiate the $2 million bailout. He then adds one final non-negotiable stipulation. Simon types that his investment firm operates under a strict advisory structure. He states he will not sign a single financial document or authorize any fund transfers without the explicit approval of his primary structural risk advisor. He names me as that advisor. He clearly dictates that my presence at the table is the absolute prerequisite for the entire deal. He hits send. The digital trap springs shut. We sit in the quiet office and watch the digital clock on the wall display the shifting minutes. Simon predicts it will take less than 10 minutes for the reality of the email to register in Cameron's panicked mind. We do not have to wait that long. Exactly 4 minutes later, my mobile phone vibrates aggressively in my jacket pocket. I pull it out and look at the screen. Cameron is calling. I let it ring 3 times to let the anxiety build in his chest. I press accept and hold the phone to my ear. Cameron does not threaten me this time. He does not scream about my neighborhood or attempt to leverage his dead mother. His voice is shaking with raw, unfiltered terror. He begs me to attend the dinner. He pleads with me to come to the mansion, promising to do whatever it takes to make things right. He tells me his entire life depends on my presence at that table. Friday evening descends on the city with a heavy, oppressive heat. I sit in the back of Stanley's chauffeured Maybach, watching the skyline shift from dense urban architecture to the sprawling, manicured estates of the ultra-wealthy suburbs. The plush leather seats are silent. Stanley and I do not need to exchange a single word. The strategy is already locked in place. The vehicle turns off the main road and glides up a massive, sweeping driveway paved with crushed white gravel. The tires grind against the stones with a satisfying rhythmic crunch. The estate looms ahead of us in the fading light. It is a massive, aggressive display of neoclassical architecture, complete with towering white columns and a wraparound portico that feels entirely disproportionate to the actual property line. It is a house built to intimidate, engineered solely to project a permanent state of financial invincibility. The Maybach coasts to a smooth halt. Before the chauffeur can even put the car in park, the heavy oak front doors swing wide open. Jessica's parents stand shoulder to shoulder on the front steps. They are flanked by DeAndre and Jessica. The scene is a perfect, desperate tableau. Jessica's father wears a bespoke navy suit that fits immaculately. Her mother is draped in dark silk, her neck heavy with diamonds. Their faces are stretched into wide, artificial smiles of absolute submission. DeAndre stands slightly behind them, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, his face a pale mask of sheer terror. He looks exactly like a man standing on the gallows. I step out of the vehicle into the warm evening air. Jessica's father rushes forward, his hand extended, his teeth gleaming under the porch lights. He welcomes me with a booming theatrical voice, completely ignoring the fact that his daughter banned me from their lives less than a week ago. They usher us into the grand foyer, their voices echoing off the polished marble floors. We are directed into a sprawling formal living room. The sheer scale of the space is intended to overwhelm the senses. Jessica's father immediately moves to a custom mahogany bar and begins pouring a rare, highly expensive vintage champagne into crystal flutes. He hands me a glass with a deep, reverent nod. He raises his own flute and delivers a lengthy, rehearsed toast to family unity, generational loyalty, and the vital importance of coming together in times of great opportunity. The hypocrisy in the room is so thick it practically chokes the air. Just days ago, I was explicitly told that my modest lifestyle was a toxic infection that had no place in their elite social circles. I was an embarrassment to be hidden away. Tonight, because I hold the key to a $2 million lifeline, I am suddenly the revered patriarch of their extended family. I accept the glass, but I do not drink. I hold the crystal by the stem and observe my surroundings with the cold, calculating eye of a structural engineer. I look past the shiny surfaces and search for the load-bearing cracks. I find them everywhere. The massive abstract paintings hanging on the walls are perfectly color-coordinated with the furniture, but they lack any personal history. I spot tiny bar-coded inventory tags tucked into the bottom corners of the canvas frames. They are rented pieces. I glance out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the pristine luxury cars parked in the circular driveway. The dealer frames are still attached to the license plates and the registration stickers indicate short-term commercial leases. The designer furniture in the room shows zero signs of actual human wear. This entire mansion is nothing more than a hollow theatrical set staged on a foundation of crushing, unmanageable debt. The wealth is a complete illusion. Jessica's mother sits across from me, leaning forward with aggressive politeness. She speaks endlessly about legacy, detailing how crucial it is for established families to consolidate their power and protect their children. She smiles at DeAndre, calling him a brilliant visionary who just needs a small push to change the world. DeAndre refuses to make eye contact with me. He stares down at his expensive leather shoes, swallowing hard, his chest rising and falling with shallow, panicked breaths. He knows I hold his confession. He knows I have the forged notary stamp. He is watching me sit in the center of his in-laws' fortress, waiting for me to detonate the bomb. The lavish performance shifts to the formal dining room. The long mahogany table is set with heavy sterling silver and fine china. The moment we sit down, Stanley executes the pivot. He drops the polite facade with terrifying speed. He does not touch his food. He opens his leather portfolio, lays it flat on the table, and looks directly at Jessica's father. Stanley's voice drops an octave, carrying the clinical deadpan authority of an apex predator. He bypasses the pleasantries and immediately demands the granular financial data. He asks for the exact cap table of DeAndre's startup. He requests the quarterly profit and loss statements, the unredacted logistics chain contracts, and the raw client retention metrics for the parent's primary company. He asks how they intend to collateralize a $2 million cash injection when their primary assets are already heavily leveraged. Jessica's father freezes. The color drains from his face. His tailored suit suddenly seems to suffocate him. He begins to sweat, a light sheen forming on his forehead. He attempts to stall, throwing out broad industry buzzwords and vague promises of future market disruption. Stanley cuts him off mid-sentence, demanding hard numbers, relentless in his interrogation. The entire room tenses as the illusion of their empire begins to fracture under basic financial scrutiny. The diversion is functioning flawlessly. Stanley has successfully drawn the undivided attention of every predator in the room. I place my pristine linen napkin on the table. I stand up slowly, scraping my heavy wooden chair back against the floor. I politely excuse myself, stating I need to use the restroom. Jessica's father nods frantically, eager for any interruption to Stanley's brutal questioning. I walk out of the dining room and down the long, dimly lit hallway. I ignore the guest bathroom entirely. I head straight for the back of the house, my eyes fixed on the heavy double doors of the home office. I quietly turn the brass handle. It is unlocked. I slip inside and power on the computer. The monitor hums to life, casting a pale blue light across the dark mahogany desk. The login screen demands a password. The people sitting in the dining room likely believe their digital perimeter is secure because they live behind a gated physical wall. They are tragically mistaken. I spent 30 years engineering defense protocols for municipal infrastructure. I built redundant fail-safes for city power grids and secured regional data hubs against coordinated external attacks. Bypassing a civilian desktop password requires no brute force. It merely requires a fundamental understanding of hardware vulnerabilities and a specific sequence of keystrokes to access the root directory. I restart the machine, hold down the designated command keys, and slide right past the operating system's superficial lock. The desktop materializes in under 40 seconds. I do not waste time browsing their personal files or vanity projects. I go straight for the primary storage drive. I locate a folder labeled with a random string of alphanumeric characters instead of a standard name. It is a pathetic amateur attempt at digital obfuscation. I plug a secure flash drive from my keychain into the computer's port. I run a rapid diagnostic script to crack the folder's local encryption. The digital lock calculates the localized key and dissolves in exactly 2 minutes. Inside the screen populates with dozens of financial ledgers, corporate tax filings, and international wire transfer logs. I adjust my glasses in the dim light. The ambient noise of Stanley dismantling Jessica's father in the dining room is completely muffled by the heavy oak doors, leaving me in absolute perfect silence. I isolate the files dated within the last 90 days. I am looking for the exact trajectory of my stolen equity. The $500,000 from my house was supposedly the emergency bridge loan to save their logistics firm from imminent collapse. I open the master ledger. My eyes scan the columns, processing the structured data with the same clinical detachment I use to analyze load-bearing stress reports. I am about to find out exactly how deep this rot actually goes. I open the most recent consolidated bank transfer log. The date matches the exact week my forged signature was processed at the commercial bank. I trace the line item for $500,000. The origin account matches DeAndre's corporate holding fund, the precise location where the stolen equity was initially deposited. I follow the digital paper trail to the destination account. The money did not go into the logistics company's operating budget. It did not pay off furious vendors or settle any outstanding shipping debts. The entire $500,000 bypassed their domestic corporate structure entirely. It was wired directly to an offshore trust account registered in Georgetown, Grand Cayman. I pull up the adjacent files, moving faster now. I uncover a series of similar international wire transfers stretching back over the last 6 months. They have been systematically liquidating every single tangible asset their logistics company owned, converting the physical capital to cash and funneling it directly to the Caribbean. They are not trying to salvage a failing business. They are meticulously orchestrating a massive, premeditated bankruptcy fraud. My stolen equity was simply the final injection of stolen capital they needed to complete their exit strategy. The cruelty of the revelation is staggering. DeAndre committed a federal felony to secure that money. He forged my name and pledged his childhood home under the absolute delusion that he was saving his marriage and rescuing his in-laws' empire. He destroyed his relationship with me to appease them. But Jessica and her parents never had any intention of using those funds to save the company. They used my son as a disposable financial pawn. I open a subfolder containing legal communications. There is a drafted document outlining an international extradition defense strategy. Sitting right next to it is a PDF containing flight itineraries for first-class one-way tickets to the Cayman Islands. The departure date is booked for next Tuesday. I count the tickets. There are exactly 3: Jessica, her father, and her mother. DeAndre's name is entirely absent from the travel manifest. The trap is brilliantly vicious. They manipulated my son into securing fraudulent funds under his own corporate name, transferred those funds offshore out of federal jurisdiction, and are now preparing to abandon the country entirely. When the commercial bank inevitably discovers the mortgage fraud, the federal investigators will follow the domestic paper trail directly to DeAndre. He is the one who signed the digital tablet. He is the one whose company initially received the illicit disbursement. They are going to flee to a tropical tax haven, leaving my son completely isolated to face decades in federal prison for a crime they orchestrated. DeAndre sold his soul to win their approval, and their final act of gratitude is serving him up to the federal government as the ultimate scapegoat. I do not possess the luxury of shock. I pull my mobile phone from my jacket pocket. I open a heavily encrypted peer-to-peer scanning application connected directly to Mr. Hayes' private legal server. I hold the phone steady over the glowing monitor, photographing the offshore wire transfer receipts, the flight itineraries, and the drafted extradition defense notes. The application automatically crops, enhances, and transmits the documents in real time. I capture 20 pages of undeniable federal evidence. Every single file is securely logged into my attorney's database, completely safe from local deletion or physical destruction. I verify the transmission receipt on my screen. The data is locked. I close the specific files I opened, rapidly retracing my digital steps to ensure the computer's history does not immediately flag my intrusion. I pull my flash drive from the USB port. I execute the final command to lock the operating system, restoring the desktop to its exact previous state. The screen goes black, plunging the home office back into shadows. The entire intelligence gathering operation took less than 6 minutes. I turn around to walk back to the dining room to finish the performance. A sharp metallic sound cuts through the silence. I hear the heavy click of a high-heeled shoe hitting the hardwood floor directly behind me. I turn my head. Jessica stands perfectly still in the doorway, her face pale with absolute fury. Jessica demands to know what I am doing in her father's private sanctuary. She takes an aggressive step forward, her high heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. The mask of the polite, affluent hostess completely dissolves, revealing the vicious, desperate predator underneath. She pulls her sleek mobile phone from her designer blazer pocket and holds it up like a weapon. She threatens to call the local police and have me arrested for criminal trespassing. She promises to ruin what little remains of my reputation and ensure I spend the night in a concrete holding cell. I do not flinch. I do not offer an excuse or attempt to justify my presence. I maintain absolute, unwavering eye contact. I slowly step away from the desk, smoothing the front of my jacket. I tell her that dialing the authorities is an excellent idea. I advise her to bypass the local precinct entirely and contact the federal bureau instead. I inform her that federal agents have a highly specific jurisdiction over international wire fraud, especially when it involves offshore trust accounts located in the Cayman Islands. The color instantly drains from her already pale face. Her hand drops slightly. The phone trembles in her grip. I watch the precise moment her arrogant certainty shatters into sheer terror. I state the exact routing number of the offshore trust. I list the total sum of the $500,000 extracted from my home. I mention the 3 first-class one-way tickets booked for Tuesday. I deliver the data with the clinical detachment of an engineer reading a structural failure report. The structural failure is her entire life. She realizes instantly that her impenetrable digital vault has been breached. The firewall she relied on to secure her escape was dismantled in under 6 minutes by an old man she deemed entirely irrelevant. The hostility evaporates, replaced by a desperate, scrambling panic. Jessica reaches backward and pushes the heavy office doors shut, sealing us inside the dimly lit room. She physically blocks the exit. She drops the aggressive posture and suddenly adopts the tone of a pragmatic business negotiator. She attempts to appeal to my sense of financial self-interest. She tells me that the current situation does not have to end in mutually assured destruction. She offers me a deal. She proposes wiring 20% of the offshore funds directly into my personal checking account by tomorrow morning. In exchange, I must delete whatever photographic evidence I have gathered, walk back into the dining room, and instruct Stanley to execute the $2 million bailout contract. She frames it as a win-win scenario, a simple transactional compromise. I look at the woman my son chose to marry. I ask her how she expects DeAndre to survive the federal fallout once her family abandons the country with his clean capital. Jessica lets out a short, cynical laugh. She admits she never loved DeAndre. She states this with chilling, absolute clarity. She explains that her parents' logistics firm was already drowning in toxic debt 3 years ago. They needed a pristine corporate entity to act as a buffer for their fraudulent operations. DeAndre was the perfect target. He was ambitious, deeply insecure, and desperate for validation. Most importantly, he possessed a flawless credit score and a spotless financial history meticulously built upon the sacrifices Evelyn and I made. Jessica married him strictly to access his pristine credit line and absorb his startup's clean assets. She admits he was never a partner. He was simply a disposable human shield designed to absorb the legal impact when the pyramid inevitably collapsed. She looks at me with hollow, calculating eyes entirely devoid of human empathy. She believes she is speaking my language now. She assumes that because I operate with logic, I only respect brutal, calculated self-interest. She is waiting for me to accept the bribe and walk away. I do not negotiate with predators. I do not entertain bribes funded by my own stolen equity. I look at Jessica in complete silence. The silence stretches heavy and suffocating, conveying a total, absolute rejection of her existence. I step forward. She holds her ground for a fraction of a second before her nerve fails entirely. She steps aside, flattening her back against the doorframe to let me pass. I do not utter a single word as I walk by her. I turn the brass handle, open the double doors, and leave her standing in the dark office with the ruins of her exit strategy. I walk down the long hallway, the sound of my footsteps steady and measured on the polished marble. I re-enter the formal dining room. The atmosphere is thick with suffocating tension. Jessica's father is visibly sweating frantically, shuffling through a stack of fabricated financial reports, while Stanley watches him with cold, predatory amusement. DeAndre sits frozen, looking like a deer trapped in the headlights of an oncoming truck. I walk around the perimeter of the mahogany table. I stop directly behind my empty chair. I look across the expensive china and crystal glasses. I catch Stanley's eye. I deliver a single, almost imperceptible nod. Stanley understands instantly. He does not ask for clarification. He closes his leather portfolio. The heavy brass clasps snap shut with a sharp, echoing crack that silences the entire room. He stands up, adjusting his tailored suit jacket. He announces in a calm, authoritative voice that the investment meeting is permanently concluded. He states that his firm will not be proceeding with the $2 million capital injection effective immediately. Jessica's father leaps out of his chair, his face flushing dark red. He demands an explanation, stammering about verbal agreements and guaranteed term sheets. He insists they are on the verge of a massive breakthrough. Stanley ignores him completely. He picks up his portfolio and looks directly at my son. DeAndre is trembling, his eyes darting between Stanley and me. Stanley's voice slices through the panic in the room with absolute precision. He tells DeAndre to ask his wife where his house equity actually went. Stanley's words drop into the center of the dining room like a live grenade. The silence that follows is absolute and suffocating. DeAndre slowly turns his head toward the hallway where Jessica has just emerged from the shadows. Her face is stripped of its usual arrogance, replaced by the sheer naked panic of a trapped animal. DeAndre demands an answer. His voice starts low, quivering with the dawning realization that he has been entirely gutted. He asks her about the Cayman Islands. He asks her about the $500,000 he criminally extracted under his own name to save her family. Jessica does not look at him. She looks at her father. The patriarch of this fraudulent empire realizes that his exit strategy is dead, and his $2 million lifeline has just walked out the door. The aristocratic facade shatters instantly. Jessica's father lunges across the mahogany table. He does not attack me or Stanley. He grabs DeAndre by the lapels of his tailored suit, screaming that this is all his fault. He blames my son for bringing the executioners into their home and ruining the offshore transfer. DeAndre fights back, fueled by the terrifying clarity that his wife's family intended to leave him holding the bag for federal wire fraud. Crystal champagne flutes shatter against the hardwood floor. The heavy dining chairs are overturned in the violent scuffle. Jessica's mother shrieks, attempting to pull the two men apart. It is a pathetic, visceral display of scavengers turning on each other when the carcass runs dry. I do not stay to watch the end of the brawl. I turn my back on the chaos and walk toward the grand foyer. Stanley falls into step beside me, his leather briefcase swinging at his side. We push through the heavy oak front doors and step out into the cool evening air. The muffled sounds of breaking glass and screaming match the crunch of the white gravel beneath my shoes. We get into the back of the waiting Maybach. The chauffeur puts the car in gear and drives us away from the collapsing fortress. The morning sun streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Mr. Hayes's downtown law office. The sterile, hyper-organized environment is the exact opposite of the chaotic wreckage I left behind at the mansion. I sit across from my attorney, watching as he meticulously organizes the digital evidence we secured. The high-definition audio recording of DeAndre's confession plays from a secure set of desktop speakers. The encrypted files containing the offshore wire transfer logs and the first-class flight itineraries rest in a neat, undeniable stack on his desk. Mr. Hayes does not waste time with theoretical legal maneuvers. He moves with the lethal efficiency of a prosecutor armed with a smoking gun. We spend the next 3 hours sitting with 2 investigators from the Federal Financial Crimes Division. I formally submit the police report for severe identity theft, international wire fraud, and felony elder financial abuse. An engineer knows that structural integrity relies on the proper application of force. We are applying the full crushing weight of the federal justice system to obliterate their operation. The investigators review the forged notary stamp belonging to Melissa Sterling. They examine the direct link between DeAndre's fraudulent commercial loan and the immediate offshore deposit orchestrated by Jessica's parents. The federal agents do not deal in emotional family disputes. They deal in paper trails, and this particular trail is painted in neon ink. Mr. Hayes confirms that the local district attorney is simultaneously drafting the arrest warrants. The flight risk associated with the Cayman Islands itinerary elevates the case to a critical emergency. Warrants are authorized for Jessica, her parents, and Melissa Sterling. The tactical net is cast wide to prevent any chance of escape or the destruction of remaining assets. I sign my name at the bottom of the official affidavit. My signature is firm, deliberate, and undeniably authentic. The machinery of the law is now fully activated, grinding forward to process the criminals who attempted to dismantle my life. I leave the office and drive back to my neighborhood, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a properly executed defense. I sit in the quiet warmth of my living room reading a paperback novel while the afternoon sun fades into dusk. The tranquility is abruptly broken by the sound of frantic, uneven pounding against my reinforced front door. The heavy brass knocker clatters against the wood with desperate urgency. I place a leather bookmark between the pages of my novel and stand up. I walk through the hallway and look through the reinforced glass pane of the front door. DeAndre stands on my porch. He is a terrifying ghost of the arrogant executive who stood in this exact spot just days ago. His expensive designer suit jacket is ripped at the shoulder seam. The top 3 buttons of his dress shirt are torn away. His bottom lip is split, leaking a thin trail of dark blood down his chin. A dark purple bruise is rapidly forming along his left cheekbone. He looks over his shoulder, his eyes darting frantically toward the street, as if expecting a fleet of unmarked cars to descend upon him. He presses his hands flat against the glass, pleading with me to open the door. I slide the heavy deadbolt back and pull the door open just a few inches, leaving the security chain firmly intact. DeAndre gasps for air, begging me to let him inside. He tells me the commercial lenders have frozen his corporate accounts and called in their private recovery agents. He screams that Jessica's father threw him out of the mansion and left him to face the fallout completely alone. He reverts to the tone of a frightened child, begging to hide in his old bedroom upstairs until he can figure out a plan. He believes the shared blood in our veins guarantees him a permanent sanctuary from the consequences of his actions. I maintain absolute stillness. I look at the blood on his face and the terror in his eyes. I do not unhook the security chain. I do not open the door. I reach into my jacket pocket and pull out a thick manila folder. I slide the document through the narrow gap in the doorway and press it against his chest. "Read it," I demand. DeAndre stares at the heavy manila folder pressed against his torn shirt. His hands shake violently as he takes it from my grip. I do not unhook the security chain. I do not invite him inside to sit on comfortable furniture. He is forced to stand under the harsh, unforgiving glare of the yellow porch light like a complete stranger. He fumbles with the metal clasp, his split lip trembling as he pulls out the thick stack of printed documents. The first page is the high-resolution photograph of the consolidated bank transfer log. His eyes dart across the spreadsheet. He recognizes his own corporate holding account number immediately. He traces the highlighted line item showing the $500,000 he stole from my home equity. He follows the column to the destination account. It is a private trust registered in Georgetown, Grand Cayman. He flips to the next page, his breathing growing shallow and erratic. He sees the drafted extradition defense strategy. Then he reaches the ultimate piece of evidence. He stares at the flight itineraries for the first-class one-way tickets booked for Tuesday. He reads Jessica's name. He reads his father-in-law's name. He reads his mother-in-law's name. He frantically searches the passenger manifest for his own name. It is not there. The absolute magnitude of the betrayal finally registers in his mind. The people he committed a federal felony to save had instantly converted his stolen funds into their private escape hatch. They had deliberately left him entirely exposed to absorb the total impact of the impending bank fraud investigation. He flips to the very back of the stack. He finds a dense, multi-page legal contract drafted on the official letterhead of Mr. Hayes' law firm. He looks up at me, his face a portrait of absolute devastation. He asks what the contract means. I tell him it means his survival is no longer guaranteed by his marriage. His survival is entirely dependent on what he decides to do in the next 60 seconds. I look at my son through the narrow gap in the doorway. I speak with the absolute, uncompromising precision of a structural engineer diagnosing a fatal collapse. I inform him that the commercial bank is already executing internal audits on the bridge loan. Federal investigators are currently processing the forged notary stamp belonging to Melissa Sterling. The tactical net is closing around him, and he has zero defensive leverage left. I point to the legal document trembling in his hands. I tell him he has exactly one option remaining. He must sign that contract right here on the porch. The document legally transfers every single remaining share of his technology startup directly to me. It acts as absolute collateral for the $500,000 he stole from my property. It ensures he can never leverage his company for another fraudulent loan. But the financial surrender is merely the baseline requirement. I lay out the second non-negotiable condition. He must walk into the downtown police precinct at dawn tomorrow. He must sit down with the federal financial crimes investigators and offer a full, unredacted confession regarding his role in the mortgage fraud. He must formally turn state's evidence against Jessica and her parents. He must surrender his phone, his corporate email passwords, and his internal communications to prove they orchestrated the offshore money laundering scheme. I tell him that if he takes absolute responsibility for his actions, Mr. Hayes will represent him. We will negotiate with the federal prosecutors to mitigate his sentence. We will help him survive the wreckage of his own making. If he refuses, I will close this door and never open it for him again. I will step aside and allow the commercial bank to completely liquidate his existence. I will watch the federal government prosecute him for international wire fraud while his wife drinks cocktails on a private beach in the Caribbean. I make it completely clear that this is a binary choice. There are no extensions. There are no alternative negotiations. He must choose between owning his crime and fighting the predators who used him or dying on the altar of their fake empire. DeAndre stares at the contract. The physical reality of a federal confession terrifies him far more than the brutal betrayal of his wife. I watch his eyes shift from the solid legal document back to the empty street. It is the exact same expression he wore when he was 12 years old and shattered the neighbor's greenhouse window with an erratic baseball pitch. He did not confess then. He hid in our garage and waited for me to walk across the street, face the angry homeowner, and pay for the damages out of my own pocket. 30 years later, his core cowardice remains entirely unchanged. He cannot accept the responsibility of standing in a federal courtroom and admitting he is a fraud. He desperately clings to the delusion of the affluent world he tried to buy his way into. He shakes his head, his bruised face contorting with denial. He tells me I am wrong. He insists Jessica's father is too powerful to be taken down by a local police report. He claims the offshore transfer was just a temporary corporate restructuring to avoid aggressive domestic taxes. He tries to convince himself that Jessica will come back for him once the financial dust settles. He refuses to wear a wire. He refuses to testify against the family he still desperately wants to belong to. He shouts that I am just a bitter old man trying to steal his startup. He throws the heavy manila folder violently against my chest. The legal papers scatter across the porch floor, blowing away in the night breeze. He turns around and sprints down the driveway toward his leased luxury car. I watch him scramble into the driver's seat and speed away into the dark. I do not call his name. I push the door shut and slide the heavy steel deadbolt perfectly into place. I pick up my mobile phone from the hallway table. I dial Mr. Hayes' private number. I tell him my son has chosen his side. I authorize him to unleash the full force of the law. Monday morning breaks with the cold, sterile efficiency of a perfectly executed algorithm. At exactly 8 o'clock, the financial guillotine drops. I sit at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee, watching the digital confirmation roll across my encrypted laptop screen. Mr. Hayes does not waste a single second. The federal warrants we drafted are executed simultaneously across 3 different jurisdictions. The commercial bank officially seizes every single corporate and personal account connected to Jessica's parents, their logistics firm, and DeAndre's heavily leveraged startup. The freeze is absolute. 30 years of engineering municipal defense grids taught me that the most spectacular systemic shutdowns occur silently. There are no alarms or warning sirens for the targets. The digital locks simply slide into place, severing their access to the lifeblood of their fraudulent empire. DeAndre's corporate credit lines are liquidated to zero. The offshore transfer to the Cayman Islands is intercepted by federal regulators and indefinitely impounded under suspicion of international wire fraud. Jessica's parents' domestic holding accounts, previously bloated with stolen equity, are locked down by the Federal Financial Crimes Division. The meticulously constructed facade of their generational wealth evaporates in the span of a single keystroke. They wake up in their neoclassical mansion, surrounded by rented luxury and leased art, entirely unaware that they cannot even purchase a cup of coffee. The bank does not send a polite notification. They send armed recovery agents to secure their physical collateral. The digital trap I engineered has completely severed their oxygen supply. The predators are now trapped inside their own cage. The reality of their financial obliteration catches up to Jessica and her mother exactly 3 hours later in the most devastating environment imaginable. They are attending an exclusive high society charity luncheon at the city's premier country club. It is a meticulously curated gathering of the local elite, a place where status is currency and reputation is everything. I receive the real-time update from the private investigator Mr. Hayes retained to monitor their movements. Jessica and her mother are seated at the head table, sipping imported champagne and projecting their usual aura of untouchable arrogance. They are entirely oblivious to the federal agents stepping through the gilded double doors of the banquet hall. The agents do not care about country club etiquette or the delicate sensibilities of the wealthy attendees. They move with blunt, undeniable authority. They bypass the maitre d' and walk directly to the head table. The entire ballroom falls into a stunned, deafening silence. The agents loudly command Jessica to hand over the keys to her luxury vehicle. They publicly announce that the car is subject to immediate federal seizure due to severe commercial lease fraud and defaulted payments. Jessica's face turns a sickening shade of ash. Her mother attempts to protest sputtering threats of legal retaliation, but her voice breaks under the collective judgmental stare of her high society peers. The illusion of their superiority is instantly shattered. Federal agents escort them out of the dining room like common criminals. Outside, a heavy commercial tow truck is already hoisting Jessica's pristine leased sports car onto a flatbed right in front of the club's valet stand. Her elite friends press against the banquet hall windows, watching the definitive collapse of the family's manufactured empire. The social execution is total and irreversible. Exactly 40 minutes after the towing incident, my mobile phone vibrates against the kitchen counter. The screen displays an incoming call from an unknown number. I press accept and raise the device to my ear. I do not even have the chance to say hello. Jessica's voice erupts through the speaker, shrill, frantic, and entirely unhinged. She is calling from a borrowed phone, likely because the federal agents have already confiscated her personal devices as material evidence. She screams a barrage of toxic obscenities, her sophisticated vocabulary replaced by raw, guttural panic. She blames me for the tow truck. She blames me for the frozen bank accounts. She screams that I have completely ruined her life, her reputation, and her family's future. She threatens to have me hunted down by her father's corporate lawyers. I let her exhaust her lungs. I listen to her hyperventilate, processing the sheer magnitude of her delusion. She still believes she holds the position of power. I do not raise my voice. I speak with the cold, immovable weight of concrete. I inform her that her father no longer has corporate lawyers because his retainers bounced at 9 o'clock this morning. I remind her that I did not ruin her life. She ruined her own life the exact day she decided I was a toxic infection. She ruined her own life the moment she looked at the man who built her husband's foundation and declared I was not immediate family. I tell her that she wanted a life without my presence, and the federal government has happily obliged. I press the red button and sever the connection. I place the phone face down on the table. The silence in my kitchen is deep and satisfying. Suddenly, my mobile phone screen illuminates again. It is an emergency alert from my exterior security system. I open the live feed. The high-definition camera shows 3 men in tailored suits standing on my front porch. They are holding heavy steel crowbars. The high-definition video feed from my porch camera streams directly to the secure tablet resting in my hands. 3 men stand shoulder to shoulder under the amber glow of the exterior light. They are not common burglars looking for an easy score. They wear dark, impeccably tailored suits and discreet communication earpieces. They move with the synchronized clinical efficiency of professional corporate fixers. Jessica's father is entirely out of legal and financial options, so he has resorted to the blunt, desperate force of the criminal underworld. He knows the digital copies of his offshore transfer logs, his forged loan documents, and his one-way flight itineraries reside securely on my personal network. He has dispatched these operatives to physically extract my hardware and obliterate the only evidence anchoring him to a devastating federal wire fraud indictment. I sit calmly at my kitchen table and watch the live broadcast unfold. The lead operative steps right up to my heavy oak door. He does not bother knocking. He pulls a specialized electronic decryption tool from his jacket and slides it over the digital keypad of my smart lock. The device pulses with a rapid sequence of bright blue lights, aggressively attempting to brute force the entry code. The second man steps to the side, wedging the flattened end of a solid steel crowbar into the narrow gap between the door and the reinforced jamb. He applies steady, calculated pressure, testing the structural integrity of the frame. The third man stands at the bottom of the porch steps, his eyes scanning the quiet suburban street for any approaching headlights. They expect a quick surgical extraction. They assume they are dealing with a standard residential perimeter designed merely to deter amateurs. They are fundamentally mistaken. I spent 30 years engineering defense protocols for municipal infrastructure. I built the redundant fail-safes for city power grids and secured regional data hubs against coordinated external attacks. When I retrofitted this house, I applied that exact same structural paranoia to my own physical perimeter. The door frame is reinforced with half-inch steel plates anchored directly into the concrete foundation. The smart lock operates on a closed-loop rotating encryption algorithm that physically disconnects the external keypad from the internal deadbolt the moment it detects a digital intrusion. I watch the lead operative curse silently. The blue lights on his decryption tool flash a harsh red. The keypad goes entirely dark. The smart lock has intentionally bricked itself, permanently sealing the entrance from the outside. The second operative grunts, throwing his entire body weight against the crowbar. The reinforced steel frame does not yield a single millimeter. I do not retreat to a safe room. I do not cower in the dark and wait for them to breach the glass. I press my thumb against the microphone icon on my security tablet, activating the high-fidelity exterior two-way speaker system mounted directly above the porch. My voice cuts through the quiet night air, amplified and echoing with absolute uncompromising authority. I advise the men to stop scratching my paint. The three operatives freeze instantly. The man with the crowbar drops his arms, his head jerking upward toward the hidden speaker. The lookout on the steps reaches inside his tailored jacket, resting his hand on a concealed weapon. I speak clearly, delivering the variables of their current situation with the cold precision of a structural stress test. I address the lead operative directly. I inform him that the electronic bypass tool he just fried is entirely useless against a mechanically decoupled deadbolt. I explain that the steel-reinforced door frame is rated to withstand a hydraulic battering ram, making his associate's crowbar practically obsolete. I tell them they have wasted exactly 90 seconds attempting to breach an impenetrable barrier. I watch their faces cycle from professional calm to dawning panic. I let the silence hang for a moment before dropping the final devastating piece of information. I inform them that my security perimeter is not monitored by a delayed third-party civilian call center. It is hardwired directly into the local police precinct's main dispatch server. The exact moment their decryption tool attempted to brute force the keypad, the system automatically initiated a silent Priority 1 distress signal. I check the digital timer running on my tablet screen. I announce to the three men that the precinct is located exactly 2.4 miles away. Given the current lack of traffic, the response units have an estimated arrival time of less than 3 minutes. I look at the countdown clock. I tell the fixers they have exactly 30 seconds to clear my property before the street is flooded with flashing lights and armed officers. I calmly suggest they calculate their own risk-to-reward ratio. Jessica's father is a sinking ship. He cannot pay them their exorbitant retainer because the federal government seized all of his commercial and personal accounts at 8 o'clock this morning. They are risking severe felony breaking and entering charges to retrieve evidence for a man who is completely bankrupt. I tell them the meter is running. The lead operative stares directly into the camera lens. He possesses the cold, calculating intelligence of a man who understands when an operation is completely compromised. He knows the math does not favor him. He taps his earpiece, issues a sharp command to his team, and violently points toward the street. The low, unmistakable wail of police sirens begins to bleed through the quiet suburban air. The sound starts as a distant hum and rapidly escalates into a piercing, localized scream. The fixers do not hesitate. The operative by the door rips his crowbar free, leaving a deep gouge in the exterior wood. He turns and sprints down the steps, completely abandoning the mission. The three men move in absolute unison, running across the manicured lawn toward an unmarked black utility van idling at the edge of the cul-de-sac. The sliding door rips open, they throw themselves inside, and the vehicle peels away from the curb, its tires screaming against the asphalt just as the flashing red and blue lights crest the hill. 3 patrol cars aggressively swerve into my driveway, their beams illuminating the neighborhood. Officers jump out, drawing their heavy flashlights, sweeping the perimeter and securing the front yard. I turn on the interior hallway lights, disengage the mechanical override on my deadbolt, and push open the front door. The cool night air rushes in, carrying the acrid smell of burnt rubber from the fleeing van. A senior officer walks up the steps, his flashlight lowering as he approaches the porch. He recognizes me immediately from previous community board meetings. We exchange a brief nod. I expect him to ask for a physical description of the men, or request a download of the security footage. Instead, his expression remains rigid and uncomfortably formal. He reaches into the breast pocket of his uniform and pulls out a thick folded legal document. He hands it directly to me, stating that he is legally obligated to serve this paperwork on behalf of the county clerk. I unfold the heavy paper and scan the text. It is an emergency injunction issued by a superior court judge. Jessica's family has filed a civil lawsuit claiming I illegally hacked their secure corporate servers to manufacture fraudulent evidence. The heavy mahogany doors of the superior courtroom swing shut, sealing us inside a theater of calculated legal warfare. The ambient noise of the city is completely severed. I sit at the defendant's table, perfectly still, my hands resting flat against the polished wood. Mr. Hayes sits beside me reviewing his meticulously organized files with the cold detachment of a surgeon preparing to amputate. Across the aisle, Jessica sits flanked by her parents and a high-priced corporate defense attorney. The lawyer wears a bespoke charcoal suit that likely costs more than the vehicle his clients recently lost to the federal impound lot. He paces the floor with rehearsed theatrical indignation. He addresses the judge with a booming voice, desperately attempting to control the narrative before the structural flaws in their case are exposed. He points an accusatory finger in my direction. He paints a highly fictionalized portrait of me as a bitter, vengeful father who cannot accept his son's independence. He claims I am a technologically savvy saboteur who utilized decades of municipal engineering experience to illegally penetrate their secure corporate network. He argues that the financial ledgers, the offshore transfer logs, and the flight itineraries were obtained through an unlawful digital breach. He demands that the court immediately grant the emergency injunction, suppress the stolen documents, and lift the federal freeze on their assets. He speaks passionately about privacy violations, the sanctity of corporate data, and the malicious intent of a jealous parent attempting to build a defensive wall out of legal technicalities. Jessica watches the judge, her eyes wide with manufactured victimhood. She plays the role of the traumatized daughter-in-law, flawlessly dabbing at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. Her father sits rigidly, his jaw clenched, projecting the false confidence of a man who believes his expensive legal representation can rewrite reality. They assume the legal system is simply another marketplace where truth can be outbid. They believe that if they invalidate the method of discovery, the underlying crime ceases to exist. I listen to the attorney exhaust his vocabulary of legal outrage. I do not object. I do not show anger. I simply watch the structural foundation of their defense stretch thin, knowing exactly how fragile the materials are. The lawyer concludes his opening statement by demanding my immediate arrest for cybercrimes, confidently returning to his seat. Mr. Hayes stands up slowly. He does not match the theatrical energy of the opposing counsel. He does not raise his voice or pace the courtroom floor. He simply adjusts his glasses, opens his leather portfolio, and addresses the judge with absolute surgical precision. He states that the defense's entire argument hinges on the premise that the financial documents are the sole basis for the federal investigation. He informs the court that the defense is fundamentally mistaken. The digital files are merely secondary confirmation of a crime that was already documented in physical ink. Mr. Hayes pulls a certified copy of the original commercial loan agreement from his folder. He holds it up for the judge to see. He explains that this is the document DeAndre used to extract $500,000 from my home equity. It is a public record filed securely with the county clerk, requiring zero digital hacking to obtain. Mr. Hayes walks methodically toward the bench and submits the paperwork into evidence. He draws the court's attention to the final page of the contract. He points directly to the official notary stamp and the signature certifying the legal transfer of the deed. He names the registered notary public who authorized the transaction as Melissa Sterling. He turns slowly and looks directly at the plaintiff's table. He clearly identifies Melissa Sterling not as an impartial third-party legal witness, but as Jessica's older sister. The color instantly drains from Jessica's face. Her father shifts uncomfortably in his chair, the false confidence rapidly evaporating from his posture. Mr. Hayes does not stop. He extracts a second set of documents from his portfolio. He submits certified airline manifests and time-stamped hotel receipts directly subpoenaed from a luxury resort in Aspen, Colorado. He lays out the undeniable physical timeline. He proves with absolute geographical certainty that on the exact date and time the commercial loan was supposedly notarized in this city, Melissa Sterling was physically sitting in a ski lodge over 1,000 miles away. It is a mathematical impossibility for her to have verified my signature. The stamp was used fraudulently by Jessica's family to bypass the legal security measures on my property. Mr. Hayes explains the structural reality of the crime. By affixing a fraudulent notary seal to a federal bank loan, they did not just commit local real estate fraud. They committed textbook undeniable perjury and federal wire fraud. He states that the offshore transfer logs I photographed merely demonstrate where the stolen money went, but the public loan document itself proves exactly how the crime was executed. The high-priced defense attorney stares at the flight manifests in stunned silence. He looks at Jessica's father, realizing instantly that his clients lied to him about the origin of the funds. The impenetrable legal wall the defense attempted to build completely collapses under the crushing weight of documented physical perjury. The entire narrative of the victimized family disintegrates, exposing the raw criminal framework underneath. The judge reviews the airline manifests and the forged loan agreement. His expression hardens into a mask of pure judicial fury. He looks down at Jessica and her parents with absolute disgust. He does not entertain any further arguments from the defense attorney. He strikes his gavel with a sharp, violent crack that echoes off the wooden walls. He dismisses the emergency injunction immediately and with extreme prejudice. He states that the court will not be used as a shield to protect individuals actively engaged in a coordinated criminal conspiracy. He turns his attention to the district attorney seated in the gallery. The judge issues a direct, uncompromising order. He mandates that the local fraud charges against Jessica, her parents, and Melissa Sterling be immediately escalated to federal felonies. He instructs the bailiffs to detain Jessica's parents right there in the courtroom to prevent any further attempts to flee the jurisdiction. The atmosphere descends into immediate, localized panic as handcuffs are drawn. I do not watch them get restrained. My attention shifts to the heavy wooden doors at the very back of the courtroom. DeAndre slowly stands up from the back bench where he has been hiding in the shadows, observing the entire proceeding. His torn suit has been replaced by a wrinkled sweater, his bruised face tight with unhinged desperation. He realizes his startup is gone, his marriage was a lie, and his freedom is rapidly expiring. He does not look at the judge or his arrested in-laws. He locks eyes with me from across the room. It is a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. He blames me for the total destruction of his artificial world. He pulls his mobile phone from his pocket, turns his back to the courtroom, and dials a number, initiating his final, desperate move. The frantic phone call DeAndre made in the back of the courtroom was not a plea for legal representation or a desperate attempt to contact his arrested wife. It was a calculated pivot to his absolute last resort. He sprints out of the courthouse and drives his leased vehicle recklessly across town, parking illegally outside the First National Bank branch on the edge of the financial district. He bursts through the heavy glass doors, his breath ragged, his wrinkled sweater stained with nervous sweat. He bypasses the seating area and marches directly to the nearest available teller. He slaps his driver's license onto the polished marble counter alongside a piece of scrap paper bearing a 9-digit routing number. He is attempting to drain his deceased mother's memorial trust fund. Evelyn was a woman who planned for generations she would never live to see. Before the cancer finally took her, she established a modest, highly specific trust intended exclusively for the college tuition of her future grandchildren. Against my strongest financial advice, she insisted on giving DeAndre secondary authorization codes for the account. She argued it was a gesture of absolute faith, a final demonstration of maternal trust that she believed would eventually force him to mature into a responsible father. She trusted him implicitly. Now, 30 years later, her son is weaponizing that dying wish. DeAndre taps his fingers frantically against the marble counter, demanding the teller execute an immediate, untraceable domestic wire transfer for the total available balance. He needs capital to flee the jurisdiction or retain a criminal defense attorney before the federal warrants completely restrict his movements. He is acting as a scavenger, willing to pick the bones of his own mother's legacy to save himself from the consequences of his fraud. He glances over his shoulder at the bank security guard, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He truly believes this stolen capital will be his ultimate salvation. The bank teller, a meticulously groomed woman with decades of institutional experience, types the 9-digit routing number into her secure terminal. DeAndre leans heavily against the counter, expecting the heavy printer to produce his redemption. Instead, the teller stops typing. Her professional smile fades into a frown of polite confusion. She clicks her mouse several times, reading the bright red text flashing across her monitor. She looks up and informs DeAndre that the transaction cannot be completed. DeAndre instantly loses his temper. He raises his voice, slamming his hand against the marble and loudly reciting the secondary authorization codes. He demands she override the system glitch immediately. The teller shakes her head and explains the structural reality of the situation. She tells him the Memorial Trust Fund no longer exists in a liquid state. Exactly 48 hours ago, the primary account holder executed an emergency asset protection protocol. The entire monetary balance was transferred into a restricted physical lockbox and a closed-loop trust. It now requires dual biometric verification and a federal judge's signature to access a single cent. DeAndre demands to know who authorized the freeze. I step through the heavy glass double doors of the bank lobby. The cool air conditioning washes over me as I walk across the tiled floor. I do not hurry. I move with the calm, deliberate pace of a man who has already won the war. I stop exactly 6 feet behind him. The bank security guard steps forward, placing a hand on his radio, sensing the immediate drop in the room's atmospheric pressure. DeAndre slowly turns around. He sees me standing there. I look at my son. I look at the man who just attempted to liquidate the dying wish of the woman who brought him into this world. The absolute moral bankruptcy of his actions strips away the very last trace of paternal sympathy I might have harbored. I do not feel anger. I feel the cold, absolute certainty of a structural engineer condemning a building that is dangerously beyond repair. I tell him the bank system automatically alerted my phone the exact second his secondary authorization codes pinged their server. I knew his cowardice would inevitably lead him here. I maintain my distance. I do not lower my voice. I speak clearly enough for the teller and the security guard to hear every single syllable. I tell DeAndre that his mother's money is permanently protected from his parasitic greed. I lay out the brutal, uncompromising reality of his current existence. I remind him that the affluent marriage he destroyed his soul to protect is now nothing more than a burned-out husk. His powerful in-laws are currently wearing federal handcuffs. His technology startup is entirely liquidated. I inform him that his physical freedom is highly temporary, expiring rapidly as federal agents process the documented perjury Mr. Hayes handed to the Superior Court judge just an hour ago. He has no corporate shares to leverage. He has no elite family to hide behind. He has no mother left to steal from. I turn my back on him. I walk toward the exit, the sliding glass doors parting automatically to let me through. I step out into the bright afternoon sunlight, leaving him completely paralyzed and destitute at the teller counter with absolutely nothing left to his name. I get into my car and push the ignition button. The dashboard screen illuminates immediately with a breaking news alert from the local financial broadcast network. The anchor's voice fills the cabin, delivering the final crushing blow to the fraudulent empire. Stanley's elite investment firm has officially filed a massive, highly publicized civil lawsuit against Jessica's parents' logistics company. They are citing systemic fraudulent business practices, gross fiduciary negligence, and intentional misrepresentation of assets. The tactical obliteration is complete. The earth is now completely scorched. The breaking news alert on my dashboard is merely the overture to the main event. By Tuesday morning, the civil lawsuit filed by Stanley's investment firm triggers a cascading structural failure across every facet of Jessica's family empire. The federal authorities, now armed with the physical notary logs and the forged commercial loan documents, do not bother with polite subpoenas. They execute a synchronized tactical raid on the neoclassical mansion in the affluent suburbs. I watch the live aerial footage broadcast from 3 different local news helicopters hovering like scavengers over the sprawling estate. The hyper-organized, sterile environment of their high society life is completely dismantled on live television. A fleet of dark federal utility vehicles blockades the manicured circular driveway. Dozens of agents wearing tactical vests swarm the property, confiscating boxes of financial records, hard drives, and digital servers from the home office. The aristocratic facade shatters under the harsh glare of the morning sun. The news cameras zoom in on Jessica's father being marched out the front doors in federal handcuffs. His bespoke suit is rumpled. His arrogant sneer is entirely gone, replaced by the hollow, terrified stare of a man who realizes his absolute control was nothing more than a fragile illusion. His wife follows closely behind, desperately attempting to shield her face from the relentless media cameras with a designer handbag. The visual destruction of their fake empire escalates as commercial tow trucks arrive on the scene. The remaining fleet of luxury vehicles parked in the multi-car garage is systematically hooked up and dragged down the driveway. The pristine white gravel crunches beneath the heavy tires of the recovery trucks. The news anchors provide a running commentary on the sheer scale of the fraud, detailing the seized bank accounts and the suspended offshore wire transfers. The anchors confirm that the logistics company was a heavily leveraged shell game constructed entirely on stolen equity and fraudulent commercial loans. I watch the broadcast from the quiet sanctuary of my living room. The fortress they built to insulate themselves from consequence has been reduced to a spectacular, highly televised crime scene. The absolute eradication of their social standing is complete. Inside the sterile interrogation rooms of the federal building, the ultimate betrayal unfolds exactly as I anticipated. Jessica's parents possess the ruthless survival instincts of cornered predators. Confronted with the undeniable physical evidence of the forged notary stamp and the illegal offshore accounts, they immediately execute their final defensive maneuver. They completely abandon their son-in-law. They present the federal prosecutors with a meticulously curated cache of falsified corporate emails and altered internal memos. These digital fabrications are designed to paint DeAndre as the rogue mastermind behind the entire financial conspiracy. They claim he manipulated their logistics company's secure servers to execute the offshore wire transfer without their explicit authorization. They argue that he utilized his technological expertise to hijack their generational wealth to fund his failing startup. They sacrifice him to the federal government in a desperate, pathetic attempt to negotiate plea deals for themselves and their daughters. DeAndre is completely unaware of the legal avalanche crashing down upon his head. He is hiding inside his leased downtown apartment. The luxury penthouse has been completely stripped of its expensive furniture and high-end electronics by commercial recovery agents. He sits alone in the dark on the bare hardwood floor, staring at the dead screen of a disconnected television. The power has been cut. The corporate accounts have been frozen. His entire existence has been reduced to absolute zero. The silence of the empty apartment is violently shattered by the sound of a heavy steel battering ram striking the reinforced front door. The lock splinters instantly. A tactical unit of federal financial crimes agents floods the dark hallway. They secure the perimeter with lethal efficiency, pinning DeAndre face down against the cold floor. They read him his Miranda rights while securing heavy steel cuffs around his wrists. The commanding officer informs him that he is being formally charged with multiple counts of federal wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit international money laundering. They drag him out of the empty penthouse and march him through the brightly lit lobby of his building. His former neighbors watch in stunned silence as the once arrogant technology executive is thrown into the back of a federal transport vehicle. He is completely isolated, entirely exposed, and utterly destroyed. The automated, pre-recorded voice of the county correctional facility operator interrupts the quiet hum of my living room. I press the button to accept the incoming transmission. The line connects with a sharp click. The background noise of the holding cell is chaotic, filled with the harsh echo of slamming steel doors and shouting inmates. DeAndre's voice cuts through the static. He is hyperventilating. The polished, condescending executive tone he utilized for the past 3 years has been entirely eradicated. He sounds exactly like a terrified, helpless child. He tells me the federal prosecutors are holding him without bond on the primary fraud charges. He screams that Jessica's family gave the investigators fabricated emails framing him for the Cayman Islands transfer. He realizes they set him up to take the absolute maximum federal prison sentence. He begins to sob uncontrollably. The sound is raw, visceral, and entirely devoid of dignity. He begs me to contact Mr. Hayes. He pleads with me to liquidate the remaining assets in his mother's memorial trust to secure a private defense attorney. He promises to sign over the entire corporate structure of his startup. He promises to publicly confess to the notary fraud. He promises to do absolutely anything I demand if I just come down to the precinct and post his bail. The desperate rambling reaches a fever pitch. He takes a ragged breath, his voice cracking under the crushing weight of his absolute isolation. For the very first time since the day he married into that fraudulent empire, he refers to me by a title he voluntarily abandoned. He calls me Dad. I listen to the echo of that word hanging in the sterile air of the federal phone line. I do not feel a single ounce of paternal sympathy. I do not feel anger. I simply acknowledge the structural failure of a man who traded his soul for a counterfeit crown. I speak into the receiver with a voice as cold and immovable as hardened steel. I only bail out immediate family. I press the red button on my phone and terminate the call permanently. The machinery of the federal justice system operates with a slow, grinding inevitability, but it eventually crushes the falsehoods in its path. Exactly 2 weeks after I terminated that prison phone call, the Superior Court finalizes the civil restitution. I sit in the polished leather chair of Mr. Hayes' downtown office, watching the morning light filter through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The illumination feels entirely different today. It is no longer highlighting a battlefield. It is illuminating a victory. Mr. Hayes places a pristine embossed folder on the mahogany desk between us and opens it with deliberate care. Inside lies the official judicial decree completely invalidating the fraudulent commercial bridge loan. The judge has formally ordered the commercial bank to immediately dissolve the $500,000 lien placed against my property. The bank executives, terrified of further federal scrutiny regarding their own catastrophic compliance failures, complied before the ink was even dry. Mr. Hayes slides the original property deed across the desk. It bears the fresh, undeniable seal of the county clerk, verifying that I am the sole, unencumbered owner of my home. My sanctuary is fully mine again. I trace my finger over the heavy parchment. This piece of paper represents 30 years of honest labor, countless mortgage payments, and the quiet dignity of a life built on a solid foundation. The predators who attempted to steal my stability have been legally eradicated from my property title. I fold the deed, place it securely inside my jacket pocket, and shake my attorney's hand. The grip is firm, sealing the end of our defensive campaign. I walk out of the law office and step into the bustling city streets. The heavy, suffocating anxiety that has shadowed my every step for the past several months simply evaporates. I breathe in the crisp air. The fortress has been defended and its walls remain completely unbreached. The judicial calendar fast-forwards 3 months into a bleak, unforgiving winter for the remnants of Jessica's family. The federal prosecutors do not offer leniency to arrogant scavengers. Faced with the overwhelming physical evidence of offshore wire transfer logs, forged notary documents, and a completely unraveled money laundering network, Jessica's parents abandon their expensive legal grandstanding. They enter a federal courtroom and formally plead guilty to multiple counts of international wire fraud and corporate embezzlement. The judge sentences them both to a decade in federal prison and orders the total liquidation of their remaining assets to pay restitution. Their neoclassical mansion is seized. Their logistics company is dissolved. Their manufactured aristocratic legacy is reduced to a cautionary tale printed in the local financial tabloids. Jessica does not escape the collateral damage of her own entitlement. The district attorney charges her as an accessory to the fraud. The state regulatory board officially revokes her professional notary license, exposing that she actively facilitated her sister's fraudulent stamps to bypass banking security protocols. She is permanently barred from the lucrative real estate career she used to leverage her social status. The judge orders her to complete hundreds of hours of community service and forces her to surrender her remaining luxury assets. She is currently living in a rented studio apartment on the industrial side of the city, working a minimum wage administrative job to pay off her mounting legal fees. Her elite country club friends do not return her calls. The artificial status she valued above human decency has entirely vanished. DeAndre meets an equally sterile fate. Without the financial backing of his in-laws and entirely abandoned by the wife he committed a felony to impress, he completely surrenders. He accepts a binding plea deal negotiated by a court-appointed public defender. He stands before the federal judge and explicitly admits his guilt in the forgery and the illegal extraction of my home equity. He officially confesses to attempting to drain his deceased mother's memorial trust fund to finance his escape. The judge strips him of his remaining dignity and sentences him to 5 years in a minimum security federal correctional facility. His technology startup is permanently bankrupt, its digital assets sold off for fractions of a penny to cover outstanding corporate debts. The fraudulent empire he sacrificed his own father to inherit has left him with absolutely nothing but a prison identification number. I visit the federal correctional facility exactly 1 time. The visiting room is a harsh, echo-filled space constructed of painted cinder blocks, reinforced glass, and bolted metal tables. DeAndre walks through the heavy steel doors, wearing a standardized khaki uniform. His shoulders are slumped. The arrogant technology executive who once stood in my living room demanding my house keys has been completely erased. He sits across from me. He does not offer a rehearsed apology. He simply looks down at his empty hands, entirely defeated by the weight of his own consequences. I do not offer him paternal comfort. I do not tell him everything will be fine. I reach into my canvas bag and pull out a thick, heavy hardcover textbook. It is a comprehensive manual on structural engineering and foundational mechanics. I slide the heavy book across the cold metal table. It stops inches from his chained wrists. I look him directly in the eyes. I tell him he spent his entire adult life trying to build a luxury penthouse on top of a swamp using stolen money and fake prestige. I tell him the structure collapsed because the materials were entirely corrupt and the ground was hollow. I instruct him to spend the next 5 years reading every single page of that book. I tell him to learn how to build a real foundation while he serves his time. I stand up from the metal chair. I do not wait for his response. I turn my back on my son and walk toward the exit, the heavy steel doors locking firmly behind me. I drive the long route back to my neighborhood, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the quiet suburban streets. I pull into my driveway and put the car in park. I look toward the reinforced front door of my home. Stanley is sitting quietly on my front porch. He is wearing his usual tweed jacket. Resting on the wooden table beside him is the exact bottle of aged single malt scotch we originally opened on Father's Day. I walk up the concrete steps and greet my oldest friend. He does not offer a boisterous greeting or a wide smile. He simply raises the heavy glass bottle of scotch in quiet acknowledgement. We do not stay on the front porch where the neighborhood can see us. We walk through the quiet house and step out onto the modest back porch. The weathered wooden floorboards creak familiarly under our weight, a comforting sound of a house that has settled perfectly into its foundation. Stanley unscrews the cork and pours the amber liquid into 2 heavy crystal tumblers. The sharp sound of the liquid hitting the glass is the only noise breaking the cool evening silence. We do not clink our glasses in a celebratory toast. There is absolutely no joy in watching your own flesh and blood march into a federal penitentiary wearing government khaki. We are not celebrating the destruction of my son or the sudden collapse of his fraudulent life. We are quietly acknowledging the survival of the truth. We sit in the worn patio chairs, feeling the cool night breeze rustle through the large oak trees lining the backyard. The scotch burns the back of my throat, leaving a warm, grounding sensation deep in my chest. Stanley looks out over the dark, manicured lawn and intentionally shifts the focus away from the courtroom. He breaks the silence by mentioning the 20-foot center console boat he keeps docked down south. He tells me the tarpon are running heavily off the coast right now. We spend the next hour meticulously planning a week-long fishing trip to the Florida Keys. We discuss the intricate details of live bait shifting weather patterns and replacing old fuel lines. We talk about the simple, undeniable mechanics of keeping a boat afloat in rough waters. It is a conversation grounded entirely in reality, completely stripped of the toxic manipulation and corporate posturing that defined the past year of my life. Stanley finishes his drink, sets the empty tumbler on the table, pats me firmly on the shoulder, and walks out through the side gate. He leaves the bottle of scotch on the table for me. The house settles into an absolute unbroken quiet the moment the side gate clicks shut. It is not the hollow, terrifying silence of isolation or the heavy quiet of impending doom. It is the deep, restorative quiet of a fortress that has successfully repelled a massive, coordinated siege. I walk back inside and stand in the dead center of my kitchen. The oppressive, suffocating weight of DeAndre's constant financial demands has been permanently lifted from these rooms. The toxic, lingering residue of Jessica's country club arrogance has been entirely scrubbed from the atmosphere. I take a clean microfiber cloth spray, a light mist of cleaner, and begin wiping down the granite countertops. The simple, repetitive mechanical motion is profoundly therapeutic. I clean the stone surface until it gleams flawlessly under the bright overhead lights. I rinse the cloth in the sink, dry my hands, and walk into the living room. I stand perfectly still before the polished wooden mantel. Evelyn's heavy brass urn rests exactly where I placed it a decade ago, catching the ambient light from the street lamp outside. I trace my finger over the engraved letters of her name, feeling the cold, solid metal. I think about her dying wish to provide a financial safety net for a future generation she would never live to see. DeAndre almost destroyed that sacred legacy. He almost turned his mother's final act of maternal love into an instrument of federal bank fraud just to save his own skin. I place my hand flat against the side of the urn and close my eyes. I did not fail her. I successfully protected the memorial trust from the desperate scavenger our son had chosen to become. I realized with absolute clarity that honoring Evelyn's memory did not mean blindly financing DeAndre's reckless delusions or submitting to his emotional blackmail. Honoring her meant stopping the cycle of abuse completely and permanently. It meant drawing a hard, immovable line in this concrete and refusing to let anyone, even our own son, cross it. The house is finally clean. The structural foundation of my life is entirely secure. The air inside these rooms feels lighter, entirely purged of the complex lies that infected my family. I walk back out to the back porch to secure the locks for the night. The 2 crystal tumblers sit side by side on the sturdy oak patio table positioned right next to the half-empty bottle of scotch. The distant streetlights cast long, peaceful shadows across the wooden deck. I reach into my jacket pocket and pull out my mobile phone. The screen illuminates instantly, casting a soft, cool blue glow against my palms in the dark. I swipe past my banking applications, bypassing the secure feeds from my exterior security cameras. I locate the social media application and tap the icon to open it for only the second time in my entire life. The very first time I opened this application, I discovered the high-resolution photograph of my son standing on a private beach in the Cayman Islands, completely severing his ties to his father for a counterfeit empire. Tonight, I am writing the final, undeniable chapter of that exact story. I open the camera function within the application. I hold the device steady and frame the shot meticulously. I capture the heavy glass bottle of scotch and the 2 crystal tumblers resting on the solid, unyielding wood of the patio table. The lighting is low, authentic, and entirely honest. I press the capture button. The image locks onto my digital screen in perfect focus. I tap the text box to enter a description of the photograph. I do not type a long, emotional paragraph detailing the betrayal. I do not offer weak explanations or seek validation from a network of strangers. I type 2 distinct sentences with the exact deliberate precision of an engineer signing off on a completed structural blueprint. Peace is expensive. Never let anyone forge your signature on the cost. I hit the publish button. The digital progress bar turns green and completes its cycle. The image is permanently broadcast to the world, closing the loop on the digital theft that started this entire ordeal. I close the application and clear it from my phone's memory. I hold the device in my hand for a brief moment, feeling the absolute finality of the action. I press the side button. The screen goes entirely dark. The legal battles are finished. The toxic empire is fully dismantled. The conflict ends. Order is completely restored. I walk up the concrete steps and greet my oldest friend. He does not offer a boisterous greeting or a wide, celebratory smile. He simply raises the heavy glass bottle of scotch in quiet acknowledgement. We do not stay on the front porch where the neighborhood can observe us. We walk through the quiet house and step out onto the modest back porch. The weathered wooden floorboards creak familiarly under our weight, a deeply comforting sound of a house that has settled perfectly into its structural foundation. Stanley unscrews the cork and pours the amber liquid into 2 heavy crystal tumblers. The sharp sound of the liquid hitting the glass is the only noise breaking the cool evening silence. We do not clink our glasses in a celebratory toast. There is absolutely no joy in watching your own flesh and blood march into a federal penitentiary wearing government khaki. We are not celebrating the destruction of my son or the sudden collapse of his fraudulent life. We are quietly acknowledging the survival of the truth. We sit in the worn patio chairs, feeling the cool night breeze rustle through the large oak trees lining the backyard. The scotch burns the back of my throat, leaving a warm, grounding sensation deep in my chest. Stanley looks out over the dark, manicured lawn and intentionally shifts the focus away from the courtroom. He breaks the silence by mentioning the 20-foot center console boat he keeps docked down south. He tells me the tarpon are running heavily off the coast right now. We spend the next hour meticulously planning a week-long fishing trip to the Florida Keys. We discuss the intricate details of live bait-shifting weather patterns and the logistics of replacing old fuel lines. We talk about the simple, undeniable mechanics of keeping a boat afloat in rough waters. It is a conversation grounded entirely in reality, completely stripped of the toxic manipulation and corporate posturing that defined the past year of my life. Stanley finishes his drink, sets the empty tumbler on the table, pats me firmly on the shoulder, and walks out through the side gate. He leaves the bottle of scotch on the table for me. The house settles into an absolute, unbroken quiet the moment the side gate clicks shut behind him. It is not the hollow, terrifying silence of isolation or the heavy, oppressive quiet of impending doom. It is the deep, restorative quiet of a fortress that has successfully repelled a massive, coordinated siege. I walk back inside and stand in the dead center of my kitchen. The suffocating weight of DeAndre's constant financial demands has been permanently lifted from these rooms. The toxic, lingering residue of Jessica's country club arrogance has been entirely scrubbed from the atmosphere. I take a clean microfiber cloth spray, a light mist of cleaner, and begin wiping down the granite countertops. The simple, repetitive mechanical motion is profoundly therapeutic. I clean the stone surface until it gleams flawlessly under the bright overhead lights. I walk into the home office and file away the final pieces of legal correspondence. I place the certified case summaries distinctly labeled as Kichban Ongdaden 2_28.docx and Kichban Ongdaden Ma 1_28.docx into the bottom drawer of my heavy iron filing cabinet. The paperwork is finalized. The threat is completely documented and securely buried. I dry my hands and walk into the living room. I stand perfectly still before the polished wooden mantel. Evelyn's heavy brass urn rests exactly where I placed it a decade ago, catching the ambient light from the street lamp outside. I trace my finger over the engraved letters of her name, feeling the cold, solid metal against my skin. I think about her dying wish to provide a financial safety net for a future generation she would never live to see. DeAndre almost destroyed that sacred legacy. He almost turned his mother's final act of maternal love into an instrument of federal bank fraud just to save his own skin. I place my hand flat against the side of the urn and close my eyes. I did not fail her. I successfully protected the memorial trust from the desperate scavenger our son had chosen to become. I realized with absolute clarity that honoring Evelyn's memory did not mean blindly financing DeAndre's reckless delusions or submitting to his emotional blackmail. Honoring her meant stopping the cycle of abuse completely and permanently. It meant drawing a hard, immovable line in the concrete. The house is finally clean. I walk back out to the back porch to secure the exterior locks for the night. The two crystal tumblers sit side by side on the sturdy oak patio table, positioned right next to the half-empty bottle of scotch. The distant streetlights cast long, peaceful shadows across the wooden deck. I reach into my jacket pocket and pull out my mobile phone. The screen illuminates instantly, casting a soft, cool blue glow against my palms in the dark. I swipe past my banking applications, bypassing the secure feeds for my exterior security cameras. I locate the social media application and tap the icon to open it for only the second time in my entire life. The very first time I opened this application, I discovered the high-resolution photograph of my son standing on a private beach in the Cayman Islands, completely severing his ties to his father for a counterfeit empire. Tonight, I am writing the final, undeniable chapter of that exact story. I open the camera function within the application. I hold the device steady and frame the shot meticulously. I capture the heavy glass bottle of scotch and the two crystal tumblers resting on the solid, unyielding wood of the patio table. The lighting is low, authentic, and entirely honest. I press the capture button. The image locks onto my digital screen in perfect focus. I tap the text box to enter a description of the photograph. I do not type a long, emotional paragraph detailing the betrayal. I do not offer weak explanations or seek validation from a network of strangers. I type two distinct sentences with the exact deliberate precision of an engineer signing off on a completed structural blueprint. Peace is expensive. Never let anyone forge your signature on the cost. I hit the publish button. The digital progress bar turns green and completes its cycle. The image is permanently broadcast to the world, closing the loop on the digital theft that started this entire ordeal. I close the application and clear it from my phone's memory. I hold the device in my hand for a brief moment, feeling the absolute finality of the action. I press the side button. The screen goes entirely dark. The legal battles are finished. The toxic empire is fully dismantled. The conflict ends. Order is completely restored. True protection often requires the courage to tear down what you have spent a lifetime building. We are taught that family demands unconditional sacrifice, but love should never require the surrender of your dignity or your financial survival. When boundaries are repeatedly breached, enduring in silence is not noble. It is complicity in your own destruction. Setting a hard limit forces everyone to face the absolute reality of their choices. You cannot save people who view your compassion as a weakness to be exploited. Sometimes the most profound act of love is allowing the consequences to finally arrive entirely unhindered. If you found value in this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know which city you are listening from, and do not forget to turn on notifications for more upcoming stories.